Intermission. Jerknev had been doing well. Very well. In any case, well. The stomach pains he had suffered since visiting the magnificent nightmare that was Nazarick were long gone, and the drawer he had once stocked with potions now held only paperwork as it was meant to. He had been liberated from every sort of distress, and he didn't have to stare in shock at the collection of hairs he had been pulling off his pillow. It felt wonderful. It felt nice. It felt comfortable. It was quite possibly the first time in his life he had ever felt so free. He nearly expected to sprout wings and go soaring into the air. He kept his genuine smile put away in his heart and faced his subordinates. His unattractive consort told him he had been smiling more recently, but he couldn't do it here. There was a base level of dignity he had to maintain. And so the meeting of the Imperial Court began. Jerknev had several secretaries, but the one before him now was the absolutely outstanding Rionette Vermilion. The man's transfer to a sinecure after he had returned from the King of Darkness's palace, in order to make sure nothing had been done to him there, was ancient history. He was now appointed head secretary. Certainly, it hadn't been done because they were sure he was free of undue influence, but to show the nation of darkness that they suspected no secrets. And it was the truth that Rionette was outstanding. Glancing over the documents Rionette had handed him, Jerknev couldn't help but laugh at how ridiculous they were. They really write the silliest things. What do you think about the report that His Majesty the King of Darkness has died? For one thing, it is, without a doubt, a complete and total whopper of a lie. Jerknev was in utmost agreement. Yeah, it's certainly a fabrication. It's unthinkable that His Majesty the King of Darkness would lose or die. This was the caster who had turned an army of 200,000 into rubble with a single spell and could hold his own in hand-to-hand combat against the martial king, the strongest warrior in the empire. Jerknev could declare with confidence that no one could possibly kill him. Of course, the king couldn't be poisoned and wouldn't die of sickness or old age either. The report was more likely to be a bad joke with the punchline that he was dead to begin with. Well, he's probably trying to sniff out discontents. But there's one problem. Which is, would the terrifyingly wise King of Darkness choose a plan like this that anybody could see through? Perhaps there's some other. Yes, perhaps there is some plot that even I cannot fathom lurking further down. Who could claim with certainty that there wasn't? No, this was a plan by the same intellectual monster who could read Jerknev's every move. He was sure this was only the tip of the iceberg. The fact that Jerknev was even thinking these sorts of things could have been part of the king's aim for whatever reason. But what if this was intrigue cooked up not by the king but by one of the king's subordinates, for example, that stupid-looking frog monster? I don't know. That said, if I don't know, I have no choice but to give up and accept my ignorance. My only job in the first place is to follow orders from the Prime Minister, Lady Albedo. As long as I obediently perform my role, we won't have any problems. As someone in charge of a vassal state, being moderately incompetent will make me less likely to get purged. I think you're right, Your Majesty. Rionette shrugged. He never used to do that, but experience must have taught him well. Perhaps it's better to say he had been emboldened. Whether the King of Darkness was dead or alive, the Empire would be fine as long as it didn't lose its status as a vassal of the Nation of Darkness. That way, Jerknev could stay clear of whatever intrigue would play out. Loyalty was the best defense. If he did all that and was still killed, he could die laughing at how narrow-minded they were. Is that it for today's work, then? Since becoming a vassal, Jerknev was about half as busy as usual, but even so, he was surprised by the lack of duties. No, Your Majesty. There's more. This arrived first thing this morning. It's from the knights. Sadly, that wasn't the end. Jerknev accepted the paper with a sardonic smile. A quick glance revealed it to be complaints about the reorganization of the orders. At one time it had been necessary to pay the knights a certain degree of consideration. Frankly, Jerknev had a lot of nobles who opposed him, so he couldn't afford to make enemies of the country's martial powers as well. But now things were different. Tell them they can complain to His Majesty, the King of Darkness themselves. What a waste of paper. The paper that reports and the like were written on was made with daily life magic, and it cost a lot no matter what tier of spell was used. Someone of Jerknev's status could toss sheafs of the stuff after one use, but he had no intention of tacitly advocating the abuse of expenses. The paper created with Tier 0 daily life magic was coarse, thick, and tinged with color. The paper created with Tier 1 daily life magic was thinner and whiter. This type could be made with paper manufacturing technology as well. But due to low production at this level, it fetched a high price. The paper created with Tier 2 daily life magic was remarkably thin and pure white. Of course, with magic, it was possible to make nearly any color of paper one desired, but since this tier could make the silky smooth, high-quality noble paper, all production capacity was entirely devoted to churning that out. I can't say that I fail to understand their resistance to leaving our national security up to another country, and like I'm always telling you, direct those sorts of complaints to Lady Albedo, not me. Besides, we're not leaving it completely up to them. This was about instructions from Prime Minister Albedo of the Nation of Darkness to fill out a portion of the Empire's military power with the Nation of Darkness's undead soldiers. Jerknev's response to this direction, which seemed like part of the overarching vassal state plan, was going to be to have some of their knights retire and disband 2 of their 8 armies. Many of their troops were mentally drained after the recent massacre, so it didn't strike him as a bad idea. The poor reaction must have been protesting the fewer number of positions to go around. They'll still have a place in the military. This is just a reshuffle. They must be upset about reduced pay and anxious about doing jobs they've never done before. All I can say about the latter is that they'll have to work at it, but the former is simply a matter of course. Who would pay people simply performing manual labor the same as people risking their lives? Jerknev sniffed disdainfully and decided to ignore the message. Before, he would have had to put some thought into how to lead them, but not anymore. Jerknev was backed by an absolute power, the King of Darkness. If there were any problems, he could just say, "Talk to the king," and shut down any discontent immediately. There was no one in the Empire who would dare complain to the one who had perpetrated that slaughter, who was skilled enough in martial arts to defeat the martial king. Previously, their dissatisfaction would have been directed at Jerknev, but now that they lived under the King of Darkness's umbrella, he was secure. No, the king was feared, so Jerknev was more than secure. And in the first place, there was surprisingly little discontent in the Empire at being made a vassal to the Nation of Darkness. That was because the Nation of Darkness made very few demands. There were some small things, mainly 2. One was to amend some of the Empire's laws to include a preamble about the absolute supremacy of the King of Darkness and his aides. The second was to hand over criminals sentenced to death. That was surprising in a different way. Jerknev had expected them to be brutalized, but one had even been returned to the Empire as falsely charged. The people's daily lives hadn't changed much at all. Now then, I need to finish this work so I can welcome my friend. Today a new, true friend was scheduled to come. The preparations had all been made, so Jerknev just had to get through his tasks. After about 30 minutes of administrative odds and ends, one of his subordinates arrived, and the guards and Jerknev allowed him in. "Your Majesty, the guest you're expecting has ARR, show him right in." He wasn't done with his work yet. But what did that matter? What could possibly be more important than greeting his friend? The friend was ushered in. Jerknev stood with a huge smile and spread his arms in welcome. The friend was a subhuman that looked like a stout little mole. The enchanted pendant Jerknev had gifted him jangled around his neck. "So good of you to come, my true friend Ryuro." Jerknev didn't hesitate to clasp his arms around Ryuro. "Jerknev, my comrade in pain. My deepest gratitude for the invitation." Ryuro hugged Jerknev back. He had claws, so he took care not to injure the emperor with them, which Jerknev could tell from how gentle the motion was. After embracing for a time, the two naturally separated in a mutual way. "What are you talking about? You know my gate is always open to you, Ryuro." Ryuro grinned. Since he was a subhuman, his grin looked downright ferocious, but Jerknev understood he was smiling. Their relationship was that close. Jerknev found it somewhat funny. From the time he was born, he had been raised as a candidate for emperor, and his peers had only viewed him as the crown prince. Thus, he was never able to build any meaningful relationships. Still, to think his first friend would be a subhuman. Me of 10 or 15 years ago would never believe it. This is one thing I really do owe to that undead. They had met in the waiting room when he had gone to visit the King of Darkness. At the time, he had only wondered where the subhuman was from and how far the King of Darkness's rule had expanded. After that, they met once more, so they talked, each angling to draw information out of the other, only to unexpectedly hit it off. 1 minute together felt as rich as a month's worth of time spent with anyone else, and thus this best of friendships was formed. They didn't bother with stiff terms and titles, but not because they were both rulers. No, they had something else in common. The two of them suffered under the same abuser, they were both victims. "Come, your jaw will hit the floor at the sight of the sumptuous feast we have prepared. Today we can take a load off and appreciate each other's struggles." "Yes, I look forward to it, Jerknev. And I brought you a bunch of those mushrooms you liked. Please eat them later." "You shouldn't have, Ryuro." The mushrooms Ryuro prepared as a gift were an incredibly fragrant, precious variety known as black jewels. They left the room shoulder to shoulder. Jerknev had been anxious when he heard that in the Nation of Darkness, subhumans were treated the same as humans. But with a glance at Ryuro next to him, only one thought came to mind. There's nothing wrong with subhumans. Not compared to undead, not compared to the King of Darkness. By the way, did you hear the news, Ryuro? Apparently, the King of Darkness has passed away. Ryuro exhaled hard through his nose. That was a laugh. Jerknev, that can't be true. The king wouldn't simply die. Yeah. I agree. But, I wonder which country's people he's torturing this time. Ryuro stared into space like Jerknev. Their eyes contained sorrow, as the pair grieved the tragedy that was no doubt occurring in some far-off place. And they felt pity for those who would surely become their new friends. The scream that abruptly filled the room caused the man to freeze. He was a member of the underground organization known as the Eight Fingers, and he had seen a lot of shocking things. But he had never witnessed such an explosion of deep, dark emotions as this. This was true hatred, a genuine curse. He wouldn't have been so surprised if it had come from an enemy. He surely would have even been able to crack a smile if that had been the case. But the voice came from his friend with whom he had shared identical pain and strife. Until now, even members of the same organization would have held one another back, struggled for power, and exploited one another's weaknesses on the daily. If two people's interests clashed, there would have been blood on the ground. But now things were different. If one person was gone, everyone else had to work harder, and the chances that they failed increased. When that happened, they were held jointly responsible and dragged off to an unspeakable hell. Being reprimanded once had given them nightmares and made it impossible to keep solid food down. Who knew what the next hell might contain? The thought alone was enough to make them all pitch in if someone fell behind in their work and to be considerate of one another's physical and mental health, out of desperation. They were all in the same boat, a community with a common destiny, true friends. And it was one of those friends who was howling and rolling around on the cold marble floor. The fear that if he didn't learn the cause he would soon end up the same spurred the man into action. "What is it, Hilma? What happened?" The screaming woman stopped her flailing, and her motion was almost an oozing as she looked up at him. "I can't. Trade spots with me. My stomach hurts. I can't watch this idiot anymore. What is wrong with him? Even if he isn't stupid, he must be completely devoid of intelligence. There was only one man among them who got called an idiot. Before, the word idiot had been used in various ways, but this guy was a true idiot, making it impossible to throw the term around lightly any longer. What happened? The idiot's up to his usual stupidity? It was as if Hilma was spewing out all her pent-up anger as she began to talk a blue streak. Yes, exactly. You heard about how His Majesty, the King of Darkness, died, right? He would have liked to ask her to slow down a bit, but half the point of listening was to relieve her stress, so he decided to bear with her. Yeah, of course. The 8 Fingers had spread the news. Which meant, of course, that they spread it throughout the Riestai's kingdom via merchants they had no direct connections with. And what do you suppose he said when he heard that? This guy was an idiot. That had to be kept in mind when replying. But he could only think of normal things. Realizing it would be impossible to know what a true idiot would say, he gave up and offered something commonplace. Something about a funeral? If that were all, my stomach wouldn't be killing me like this. He's saying that if he marries Lady Albedo, maybe he'll be able to gain control of the Nation of Darkness. Emitting a hoarse yelp in spite of himself, the man hastily scanned the area. He couldn't sense them, but he was sure there were observers from the Nation of Darkness present. Confirming that they weren't coming for him, he breathed a sigh of relief. They had been ordered to find an idiot, but he was not about to be thrown into that hell for turning in someone too idiotic. Hey! We were ordered to get an idiot, but maybe we should do away with that guy and find one who's a little more normal. Is there anyone else we can get? The man's answer made Hilma scream and flail again. The hem of her dress flew up, exposing her thighs. The man pitied the woman for being reduced to this shameful state, utterly devoid of any charm or appeal, despite her past renown as a beautiful, high-class prostitute, because he knew that if it were him in her place, he would surely be screaming and rolling around on the floor, too. Hilma, please hang in there a little longer. She froze again and cast an envious glare at him. You could manipulate the guy, or rather, warn him not to do anything stupid. But shouldn't that idiot be easy to handle, given how you're a woman? His question had Hilma rolling around, screaming. Again. That was her answer. It won't be that long. 2 or 3 more years and we'll be able to make our move. Make him an even bigger idiot by then. I'll help you build the idiot faction. 2 years is way too long. But those are our orders. Control the intel so that no matter what they do, it doesn't matter, and create a faction that acts in an increasingly stupid manner. I know that, but come on. Hilma froze and sat up. You're so lucky. All you did was use traitors to tell the second prince that the King of Darkness, His Majesty, yes, His Majesty, is dead. You say that like it's nothing, he thought. He had never thought of that prince as clever. But recently it hit him that he had been putting on an act because of his elder brother. Since the recipient was no slouch, he had to take careful pains before handing over any information. It couldn't come out that they were working for the King of Darkness. My job isn't a walk in the park either, you know. Yeah, sorry. I know you have it rough, too. How's tonight look? Hilma mimed drinking. Not bad. Let's do it somewhere no intel will leak even if we get trashed. They couldn't handle solids, but drinks were a different story. A wan smile appeared on Hilma's face. We'll be fine. Our supervisor will handle it. He matched her laugh. I suppose, you're right, I do wonder where the lucky fellow is. There was only one lucky fellow among them. Kakoter? He lost all his authority during that mess. He must still be locked up, lucky bastard, seriously. End of intermission. If you like my content, join me on Patreon, where you can find more and exclusive novels. Also, you can leave a donation by clicking the Super Thanks button. Thank you very much for your support. Chapter 6. gunner and archer. Nia left Caspion's room and headed straight for the archery range. The unit members who had been waiting for her return promptly gathered around. Surrounded by her comrades asking questions like, "Miss Baraja, how did the meeting turn out?" and saying, "We're ready to go anytime," she told them about the meeting. She told them everything, what had happened, what they had spoken about, and what conclusion they reached. Many of them made their livings as hunters, so they had advanced survival capabilities. But though frustrated, even they had to agree with Caspion's decision. Apparently, it really would be a challenge to mount a search and rescue operation in the hills. If that was the case, then sending a rescue party right away would be impossible. But they would at least search the Sacred Kingdom's territory in the east, up to the fortress line. They didn't know where the king had landed. It was possible he was inside their borders. A few with ranger skills came forward. Nia wanted to participate, but she had next to no ranger skills. If she went along, she would only be a burden. Not being able to assist in the rescue of the just king, who had offered aid to a foreign country, made Nia, as his attendant, feel so disloyal that it was as if her heart were being gouged out. She wanted to scream like Remedios had that one time. But even if she did, it would change nothing. She told everyone that she had gotten permission to search their country's territory, but she wouldn't be accompanying them. "You can count on us, Miss Baraja. Yeah, we owe His Majesty a huge debt, so we'll keep our eyes peeled and be sure not to miss a thing. Thank you, everyone. Once we get the okay from Master Caspion, I'll be entrusting everything to you." Nia bobbed her head. "So, Miss Baraja, what should the rest of us do? How can we be of use to His Majesty?" Seeing their passionate gazes, Nia felt happy. Even after witnessing what they had, not a single one of them believed the King of Darkness was dead. That's right. There's no way His Majesty would die. He must be waiting for us to rescue him, right? She couldn't imagine such an absolute power waiting for their rescue. It seemed more likely that when they found him, he would be sipping a glass of wine in front of a giant heap of subhuman and demon corpses. Okay. Then, the rest of you, let's get training. Weakness is wickedness, you know. Yes. That was all Nia was capable of at the moment. She had to get stronger so that she would be able to help more next time. If they had been strong to begin with, the embodiment of justice never would have been put in such a situation. Yeah. Came the spirited cheer in reply. They all understood Nia's words. His Majesty the King of Darkness is justice, and weakness is wickedness. More than a few had been on board from the beginning, but others had grown to understand as they heard it repeated over and over. All right, then I'm going to go meet with Master Caspion. When she went to discuss directly with Caspion, she immediately received permission to dispatch a search party. The group left that day, and it had been 3 days since then. She had been worried that if people with differing opinions were in charge of selecting the search party members, it would be a big mess. But luckily, she was allowed to select the members, and they were able to make a speedy departure. As for those 3 days, despite the rumor of retaking Karanshaw going around, the Liberation Army wasn't moving, and, though Nia's unit continued their diligent training, and the number of people who accepted the King of Darkness as justice was growing, time passed meaninglessly. Nia scowled in irritation as she loosed an arrow into her target. Perhaps her impatience and anger had caused her hand to slip. The arrow struck slightly off-center. Usually, someone would crack a joke, but now no one dared comment. It was because of her face. Her vexation at not being able to do anything for the King of Darkness, combined with the lack of information coming in, kept her from sleeping, so huge dark circles had formed under her drooping eyelids, that plus the creases in her brow made her face a sorry sight. She was always hiding her expression with her mirror shade, so it was quite a shock to see her whenever she took it off. Nia's subordinates understood plenty well what she was thinking. But they still couldn't approach her. "Tie the King of Darkness, His Majesty the King of Darkness, His Majesty the King of Darkness, His Majesty the King of Darkness," the words swirled around and around in Nia's head. She knew the shoulders of the people drawing their bows nearby flinched whenever she grumbled. Darkness. This is no good. I have to calm down. Calm down. It's only been 3 days. Even just the Sacred Kingdom's territory east of here is huge. You don't want to frighten everyone, do you? Nia removed her mirror shade. She heard someone who happened to be looking her way amid a tiny shriek, and massaged her temples, trying to loosen up her rigid face. Just then, she picked up the sound of 2 sets of feet rushing across the training range toward her. From the jangle of male shirts, she gathered it wasn't militiamen who had come to practice. Paladins wore plate armor, so it wasn't them either. It was probably either high-ranking servicemen or their adjutants. Squire Nia Baraja. When she looked in the direction of the interruption, the 2 men backpedaled and screamed. What? Do you need something? You're the ones who came to talk to me, thought Nia as she replied. Haven't seen you guys in a while. Thanks for the usual reactee, or I guess it was a bit more dramatic than usual. They were 2 squires Nia had studied with. That said, she had never really talked with them, so she didn't know what their personalities were like. Still, she remembered their names and faces. If she knew them, that meant they knew her. They should have been used to her serial killer eyes. So was her face really that horrifying right now? Right, she recalled. They had been liberated from one of the prison camps. You're not usually so, your eyes don't always make you seem to hate the whole world quite so much. Or maybe they do? Nia rubbed her face. Maybe it was better not to take the mirror shade off. Sorry. So could you tell me why you're here? Master Caspond is summoning you. He wants you to come right away. Master Caspond? She had some ideas why he might summon her, but she couldn't think of any reason that made sense. She hoped it was good news. Got it. Please tell him I'm on my way. Even after she replied, they didn't seem to be going anywhere. Nia found that puzzling. What? Is there something else? No, just, not your expression, but something about you overall. The vibes you give off have changed a bit. I can't really describe it, but, if you mean that in a good way, I'm glad, but, people change. We've all been through so much. Yeah, you're right. That makes sense, Baraja. The 2 smiled weakly and must have been satisfied, because they said, let's talk more later, and left. Nia addressed the subordinates looking her way and told them she was going to see Caspond, then left immediately. The house Caspond was living in was the same, but she was shown into a different chamber because of the huge hole Jaldabaoth had opened in the wall of the room he had been using up until last time. Even with her mirror shade on, she could pass freely through to his chamber. Was the reason she didn't have to check her bow with a guard because they trusted her? Or was it because the item had been borrowed from the King of Darkness? Squire Nia Baraja reporting in, Master Caspond. In the room were Caspond, seated, and 2 standing paladins, Remedios and Gustav. Nia immediately took a knee. Thank you for coming. We were waiting for you. Don't worry about kneeling on ceremony. Stand up. Rising as instructed, Nia replied, my apologies for keeping you waiting. What may I do for you? First, Squire Nia Baraja, remove that item covering your face. Gustav said something utterly obvious. From a common-sense standpoint, he was entirely correct. Yes, sir. Please excuse the oversight. When Nia removed the mirror shade, Gustav's eyes bulged slightly. Are you not feeling well? Maybe you should have a priest take a look? No, I'm doing all right. It would have been a pain to explain, so she moved the conversation along. So could you tell me what this is about? About that. There's one more person I want to join our discussion. I'm going to invite them in now, so please don't be alarmed. Out of the corner of her eye, Nia saw Remedios make a sour face. If her commander was grumpy about the person, they probably had something to do with Jaldabaoth. The words demon maids came to mind again. Gustav opened the door to the next room as instructed by Caspond and called inside. The one who came out was a grotesque. Nia knew what race, too. A Zerruin. It was a race with glistening skin, but contrary to what one might expect given their appearance, there was no foul smell, only a bloody scent so faint as to go practically unnoticed. What's a subhuman doing here? Perhaps sensing Nia's question, Caspond spoke. We've received a messenger. Does that mean this is a messenger from Jaldabaoth? The Zerruin braced themselves as Nia unconsciously projected hostility. Wait, Squire Nia. You seem to be misunderstanding. This isn't Jaldabaoth's messenger. Just the opposite. This Zerruin is one of the ones trying to rise up against him. Nia's murmur seemed to be just what Caspond was waiting for, and he grinned. You seem surprised. Well, of course you are. You probably didn't imagine anyone was rebelling against the ruler of the subhumans, did you? But there is resistance. According to what the messenger has told us, not all the subhumans are faithful followers of Jaldabaoth. There are other races like the Zerruin, whose ruling class, equivalent to our royal family, was taken hostage, so they're forced to obey. And they want us to rescue those hostages, right? That's right. Nia was surprised to hear a new woman's voice and glanced around the room. Her gaze landed, as unlikely as it seemed to be, on the Zerruin. She wouldn't have been surprised to be told it was the voice of a human. From where in this repulsive body did a human voice come from? Was it one of the Zerruin's racial abilities? Or was it a magical power? Our cherished leader is being held captive in the city 5 days southwest from here that you humans call Cairnshaw. We're requesting a rescue operation. Nia pictured the map of the Sacred Kingdom in her mind. It seemed that the Zerruin was indeed speaking of Cairnshaw. She wondered if it wasn't more southwest by west or if it would really take 5 days to get there, but that all felt within the margin of error. But there was one thing she didn't understand: why are they coming to me with this topic? Before she could think more about it, Caspond said something that startled her. So, Miss Baraja. We've decided to join forces to resist Jaldabaoth. Nia doubted her ears. Can we really trust this monster-like race? We can't even tell what expressions they're making. We bowed before Jaldabaoth's immense power and invaded this land as one wing of his grand army, but we received word that our king, who was left behind in the hills as a hostage, has been killed by demons. So if you will say the other symbol of our subordination, our imprisoned prince, well, he's already the king now that our previous king has been killed, we'll cooperate with you. Had they killed him because they decided they didn't need 2 hostages? Or was there a more demonic reason? Nia wasn't sure, but the important thing was surely that their king had been killed. That said, we intend to have the new king flee to somewhere Jaldabaoth won't be able to reach him, so his elite guards won't be able to participate. But the other 3,000 soldiers brought here by Jaldabaoth will probably fight on your side. With at least the king and 1 female, our race can survive, so you can grind the army into nothing if necessary. So that's the deal. You know the conditions I believe in for victory against Jaldabaoth, but turning subhumans against him will result in fewer losses than reducing their numbers in battle. Additionally, they've volunteered some valuable intelligence, which we've just finished verifying and following up on. Caspond grinned as he continued. We've confirmed that this leak isn't a trap from Jaldabaoth's side, so it becomes something to hold over the Zerruin. If Jaldabaoth finds out, they'll be purged, and their prince, their new king, might even be killed. Caspond threateningly suggested what might happen if the Zerruin betrayed them. Maybe it was a normal precaution for a leader to take, but Nia was a bit frightened to see Caspond calmly exhibiting such heartlessness. But as she regained her composure, a question bubbled up. Why is he giving me all this background? If he wanted her to carry out the rescue, he could simply order her to do it. Sure, she led the archer unit, but at the end of the day, she was merely a squire who was handy with a bow. She didn't need to know all the details about the operation. Yet, here they were. Is he still treating me as His Majesty's attendant? since I have one foot in the nation of darkness? Maybe the idea was to be able to say that he had intended to have her listen along with the King of Darkness. Or maybe he wanted her to explain the situation to him the next time she saw him. Yes. Nia was still the king's attendant. When Nia stood up straighter, she noticed Caspar look puzzled at the change in her. Anyhow, we've decided that it would be nearly impossible to get the prince out during the chaos of our raid on Cairnshaw. That's right, said the Zeruan, taking over from Caspar. First, let us explain where the prince is being held. Deputy Commander, please fill in details as necessary. The Zeruan explained their reasoning with some extra commentary about Cairnshaw Castle from Gustav. First, the major city of Cairnshaw was a city governed directly by the royal family and located in an area covered with low hills, surrounded by a thick defensive wall. Its large castle stood on the highest spot, in the west. Since it was situated in such a way as to block a subhuman invasion that had broken through the country's fortress wall, and the trade junction with a route to the south was also nearby, it was the most fortified city in the entire Sacred Kingdom. And Cairnshaw Castle, which was almost never used and only built for siege battles, was just as tough. The problem was the prince was being held in one of the spires of that castle. It was the spire farthest back, meant to be the site of final resistance, and was thus the most impenetrable place in the entire Sacred Kingdom. In order to avoid invasions by flight, the spire had no windows, it was only accessible via an aerial walkway that stretched out from the main castle. The spire currently had a powerful guard, of a race thought to be a close relative to ogres, the VAM, who could use water powers, and Zeruan weren't allowed to go anywhere near it, so there was no telling what would happen to the prince if they did. But if the betrayal happened in a way that kept the true actors secret, if they saw a human with no connection to the Zeruan, there was no way they would hurt the prince. On the contrary, might they not protect him? That was the Zeruan way of thinking on the matter and the reason they wanted help from the humans. Naturally, if a major battle began while the prince was still imprisoned, we would have to fight you to the death, just like all the others who were brought to these lands for that purpose. And then, the Zeruan faded out, but Nia knew the rest without it being said. It would be too late. It was only because the Zeruan had the humans as an enemy that flipping sides and saving the prince had value. If the Zeruan were wiped out, there would no longer be any reason to save the prince. Once fighting breaks out, it will be too late to send a rescue party. So sending in an elite group to work in secret now would be the safest way to save the prince and have the highest chance of success. Squire Nia Baraja, I want you to lead the operation. I can't. There's no way. Her response to Caspon's order was instantaneous. Objecting to her commander's order was both against military regulation and generally unacceptable socially, but the appeal was to common sense because the order went against it in the first place. It was too great a challenge. I thought you might say that. But, Miss Baraja, this is a very good deal for you. Caspon smiled. They'll tell us everything they know about the hills and introduce us to a reliable guide. Nia's breath caught slightly. She wanted to bite her lip, but she restrained herself, choosing to keep her emotions hidden. How far can we trust what they say? If we save the prince, the Zeruan will coordinate with our attack and revolt internally. That should make it much easier to take back Cairnshaw. We should be able to capture many more prisoners than we would in an ordinary siege. The Zeruan have also said they'll tell us which of the prisoners have information that you're looking for. We don't know the details, the Zeruan chimed in, but we heard you want to go to the Able Lion Hills. If you save the prince, our entire race will be indebted to you. We wouldn't hesitate to share our knowledge with such a person. It's not as if it's particular, special knowledge that we need to keep secret. It was an argument that made complete and utter sense. Refusing this would be disloyal to His Majesty. I can't just hang around twiddling my thumbs, because I don't want to die when I have a chance to be of use to the king. Thinking more calmly, Nia felt like this was the best chance she would get. Still, she didn't feel like committing suicide. Who would join me on the team to rescue the prince? Nia glanced at Remedios, who had remained silent the whole time. I'm not going. Stealth isn't my forte. That goes for me, too, though, thought Nia, but she said nothing and turned to Caspond. I've been telling her she has to go with you, but she won't have it. So we're sending you with a prisoner, no, a cooperator. You can just call her a prisoner. Commander. It's fine, Deputy Commander Montagnes. Will you bring her in? Gustav left with a yes, sir. The Zeruan messenger left at the same time. Nia figured they wanted the identity of their cooperator to be on a need-talk-no basis only. Gustav returned right away, but he wasn't alone. He was leading a girl in chains whom Nia had never seen before. She was smaller and more delicate, and judging by her face, she seemed younger than Nia, too. She wore a scarf with a complex, distinctive pattern of dark green and ochre paired with an unusual maid uniform. Looks-wise she had the complete package, even with one eye covered, her beauty was unmistakable. Recalling what Evil Eye of the Blue Roses had said, Nia could make a confident guess as to who this was, but she asked just to make sure. Master Caspond, who is this? Haven't you guessed? She's one of Jaldabaoth's maids who appeared in the city. Nia froze. Even though she had imagined that to be the case, it was a surprise. Difficulty level 150. In other words, a monster among monsters. A being a human couldn't hope to defeat was standing before her eyes. But there was still something else surprising her, that she could still harbor such intense hatred in the face of an unbeatable enemy. They were creatures on completely different levels, so if Nia could feel that way, was it because the maid wasn't scattering fear? Or did it stem from her devotion to the King of Darkness? Regardless, Nia banished the hatred to the depths of her heart so it wouldn't be visible. If she wasn't careful, she would openly curse this maid for being one of the reasons the King of Darkness had been defeated by Jaldabaoth. But neither Gustav nor Caspond seemed to be worried about Remedios putting her hand to her holy sword. They must have decided there was no immediate danger. Otherwise, they would never let her appear somewhere with the Holy Lady's brother. I'm a killer. You don't need to be afraid. I'm loyal to Lord Ainz now, not Jaldabaoth. I won't attack you. I can't believe that, Nia spat, irritated at the way she called him Lord Ainz. But the maid replied in a steady tone. You don't have to believe me. I merely stated the truth. Miss Baraja, it appears that during that battle, His Majesty the King of Darkness somehow managed to steal control of her from Jaldabaoth. Nia's eyes widened slightly. So even though he was surrounded and outnumbered, he was fighting with the goal of flipping the maids, not killing them? Nia didn't know much about magic, so she wasn't sure how much of a challenge that would be. Would it be similar to stealing a powerful opponent's equipment mid-duel? If so, it was a feat only the King of Darkness was capable of. Nia fiercely admired him. But two questions came to mind. She had no problem believing that the King of Darkness was capable of such a thing, but was this maid really under his control? Could she simply be pretending to side with the king on orders from Jaldabaoth? And the other question was, I understand that you'll be faithful to the King of Darkness. But why are you here? Because you're in chains? No. The maid flexed, and the thick chains began to make awful creaking noises. Don't. Remedios boomed murderously, and the noise stopped. Even I can break normal, unenchanted chains. Then why? Why don't you leave here and join the King of Darkness? Nia wondered if maybe the maid had some sort of demonic intuition or an ability as a demon under the king's control that would allow her to find him. When she asked in a roundabout way, the maid gave her a matter-of-fact reply. Because I have orders. The last order he gave me was to cooperate with you. So I'll do everything I can without dying. What? Nia was shocked. His Majesty came here in order to take control of the demon maids, to gain their powers and strengthen the Nation of Darkness. So he should have ordered her to go to the Nation of Darkness. Yet, he. How kind of him. Could there possibly be another king so generous and compassionate toward people from another country? No, it's impossible. The King of Darkness is special. He truly is justice. Amazing. Nothing I've been thinking is wrong. Nia felt like something hot was starting to pool in her eyes, but she pushed through the feeling. Without dying? I'm not going to fight Jaldabaoth. If you face him, it will be difficult to escape. Nia understood. Caspond must have looked into the truth of her story. He wouldn't have brought her here otherwise. So you want me to take this demon with me? That's right. The other option would be to send her to the Nation of Darkness as a messenger, but instead, after the other thing, once we get some help and acquire some information, we'll send a rescue party over there. And it would be better to have her be part of that, because it's a dangerous mission. Since the people you sent out to search our lands haven't found anything, he must have fallen on the other side. For some reason, Caspond was being awfully vague. Nia glanced over and saw that the maid's expression wasn't so much as twitching. She didn't even seem worried. Of course, it was possible this maid didn't know what had happened to the King of Darkness, maybe she hadn't imagined that he could be in danger. But her expressionless face offended Nia. And was she even allowed to be so casual with him, Lord Ainz? No, there's no way she has permission to do that. Decided Nia. Even I'm not that friendly with him. Miss Baraja, yes? Crap. She blushed slightly. She had gotten too absorbed in her annoyance at the maid. What is it? Is something bothering you? It's nothing. Only 3 days have passed since the search set out. I think it might be a little soon to conclude that he didn't fall in our territory, I see. That's true. But we should probably be prepared just in case. Yes, of course. Good. Then Miss Demon Maid. This is our 3rd time speaking. We talked the day we found you, yesterday, and today, right? The maid said nothing and just stared at Caspond. If I told you I wanted you to infiltrate a major city and rescue a prisoner being held there, would you agree to cooperate? As I said yesterday, I will cooperate. I see. Got it. Then sorry, but would you mind going back into the other room? Deputy Commander Montagnes, please see her out. After taking the maid out, Gustav returned alone, and the conversation started back up. Miss Baraja, I don't know if it's necessary to tell you this much or not, but if we send you into Karanshah, it's possible the success of the operation will depend on what you know or don't. For that purpose, let me explain a few things. First, about Jaldabaoth. Caspond relayed what they had heard from the demon maid. There hadn't been much about Jaldabaoth. Or more like, next to nothing. She didn't even know what sort of abilities he had or what attacks he was vulnerable to. She didn't know what he was currently doing or what his aims were, either. The only thing she said was that if he was seriously injured, it would take a while for him to recover. Apparently, it was similar to how the bigger a vessel was, the longer it would take to refill if drained of its contents. After being told things about Jaldabaoth, the subhumans, and other demons in this way, Nia's first question to Caspond was, how far can we trust her? We can't. Killing her would be safer. That was Remedios. Nia wanted to ask, can you defeat a difficulty level 150 demon? But she held it back and waited for Caspond's response. It's tricky. It could be part of Jaldabaoth's plot. She might be a spy on the lookout for Mammon or someone else who could resist against him. That was why he had the Zeruan leave before bringing the maid in, and also the reason he was putting things in such vague terms. I told you. We should kill her. Then we don't have to worry about any of that. I see, Commander Custodio. That would be one way of doing things. But there's a good chance it's true that she's under the King of Darkness's control. She's not just spewing lies about Jaldabaoth, but instead telling us she doesn't know. However, the fact that she hasn't heard anything about the King of Darkness is And you made a pact with the King of Darkness that we would turn over the demon maids, right? So if we killed her, we would be known as a country that doesn't follow through on its promises. If that happens, there might not be any countries who would help us if we need it. But Jaldabaoth killed that guy. At Remedios's remark, Nia lowered her gaze and focused on containing her rage. Thanks to this woman, she actually felt like she had gotten better at controlling her emotions. We haven't confirmed that. That's why I'd like to test her by using her in the rescue of the prince. If she betrays us by leaking intelligence, all that will happen is the Zeruan will be purged, which means fewer subhumans to deal with. And we can get rid of the rat trying to smuggle itself in here, so there are two benefits. Or if it works out instead, we can just be happy. I hope you don't forget the life of the person you're sending on this stealth mission, grumbled Nia in her head. You don't know what the maid's weakness is? If I'm supposed to travel with her, it'd be nice to have a way to handle her if she betrays me. No, I couldn't very well ask that. He smiled awkwardly, and Nia wore the same expression. Even if she answered, how could they verify it? They wouldn't be able to tell by looking, and it would be impossible to test. Well, it's not as if we have control of her. She's just cooperating with us, because the King of Darkness ordered her to. Gustav stated the obvious, both Caspond and Nia were aware of that. There was only one who didn't get it. So the infiltration team will be the maid and me. Who else? About that. If you have no one else to recommend, I'd like it to be just the two of you. For a moment, she was sure he was joking, but when she looked at him, his expression was serious. To add to what Master Caspond has said, it's better for an infiltration mission to have fewer people, right? You can't have anyone getting in your way. So we don't recommend anyone else. Gustav offered a sensible reason, but Nia knew it wasn't the only one. That was simply the position Nia Baraja was in. If the rescue operation went well, it would be great for everyone. If it failed, it would just mean the deaths of a troublesome squire who was close to the King of Darkness and the King of Darkness's subordinate. And if the maid betrayed them, they would sacrifice next to nothing. It could be called a perfect plan. So then, was the story about telling Remedios to go with her a lie? Or was it possible they really did just decide that this way would risk fewer losses? Nia exhaled with a phew. Either way, there was only one thing to do. This was a good chance to demonstrate her loyalty to the King of Darkness. Understood. That's a she, right? She thought, and I will go on our own. Fantastic. We're counting on you. Yes, sir. We're having Deputy Commander Montagnes draw up a plan of the castle. It should be ready by the time you depart. And if one of Jaldabaoth's aides is there, avoid combat. According to what they'd heard from the maid and the Zeruan, Jaldabaoth was served by 3 great demon aides. One ruled the Abel Lion Hills, where the subhumans lived. One commanded the army invading the southern Sacred Kingdom. And one managed 3 major cities, moving among Karanshaw, Lyman, and Prado. That was the story anyhow. So if they were unlucky, they might run into the one managing the cities. Apparently, this manager demon was headless and had a body like a dead tree. No wings or tail and a height of around 6.5 feet. It had claws, and its slim body was far stronger than it looked. Despite not having a head, it was fully aware of its surroundings and could even read. Well, expect the demonic when you're dealing with demons. Incidentally, the capital, Jobans, was under Jaldabaoth's direct control, which is why there was no aide managing it. Who is stronger, the maid or that aide? She told us she isn't sure. Nia wanted that maid to show her what she could do. Not knowing what sort of weapons she specialized in or what kind of special abilities she had could result in unexpected failures. The 3 great demons are all generals and landlords. But perhaps because they don't consider subhumans capable of using their heads, they are building dictatorships. That means the great demons do much of the administration themselves without appointing successors or deputies. By defeating them, we could ruin the better part of the subhuman alliance army's coordination and supply chain. Which would satisfy your conditions for victory, Master Caspond? Yes. Well, if Jaldabaoth's wounds heal, he may step in and take command, but I doubt he would push his luck by showing up now. If we rip off his arms and legs, we may not even need to crush the head to win. That said, our priority right now is the rescue. Understood. So, when will we initiate the rescue mission? I'd like to set off as soon as we're ready, but may I first please talk to the demon maid some more? Very well. Then how about you leave in 2 days? Nia agreed and left the room after getting permission to speak to the maid again. The responsibility weighed heavy on her shoulders, but her steps were firm and her expression brimmed with determination. The wild flame that seemed to have lost its purpose of late gained new direction and provided a faint light illuminating her path forward. There was something for her to do, and what lay ahead was that supreme being. With that in mind, what did it matter if she had to travel with a dangerous demon? The demon maid was in a mansion with a garden. Well, it wasn't really big enough to call a mansion, but neither was it small. It seemed like one of the wealthier residents of the city must have lived there at one time. Some of the lavish ornamentation it had before the tyrannical occupation by the subhumans was broken, and what must have been a statue had been smashed. Still, the bones of the house had remained intact, and it didn't seem likely to let in the cold winter air. But it might as well have been a poorly built shack. Every last window had been boarded up as if someone was so paranoid they didn't want to let even a tiny bit of air in or out. In essence, it was a cage, or perhaps it would be better to call it an isolation cell. Accommodating this monster lackey of either an undead or a demon, who was also the subordinate of the hero king ostensibly visiting from his country to rescue the sacred kingdom, the place was an interweaving of various speculations, the sense of crisis, the urge to steer clear, and more. It was unclear what exactly the purpose of wrapping her in chains was at that point, but perhaps it was difficult to show the demon maid proper hospitality when she hadn't received an official introduction from the King of Darkness. The wall around the mansion had been repaired in a hurry, but the all-important portcullis was missing. It must have been requisitioned during an iron shortage. Meant perhaps as a replacement, there was a hastily built hovel of a guardhouse out front. Sturdy men equipped with armor occupied it, as well as one paladin who was there as a commanding officer. Nia handed him the parchment Caspond had prepared for her. After looking it over, the paladin handed it back and gave her a candlestick. The candle was lit. She was visiting during daylight hours, but since there was no way for the sun to reach inside through the boards and the demon maid didn't require light, the interior was pitch dark. Nia passed through the gate and crossed the overgrown garden. The brick path leading to the entrance was crumbling in places. When she reached the door, she took a deep breath. She used the knocker. There was no answer. After hesitating a moment, she turned the knob. The door wasn't locked. Darkness peeked out from the narrow opening. She couldn't hear the slightest sound. It was as quiet as a mausoleum. Nia braced herself and went inside. There were no lights and no servants. The only people in the house at this moment were Nia and a difficulty level 150 demon. Cold sweat dripped down her back. The candle in her hand flickered feebly. Beyond the glow of the flame existed the darkness as it had been, ready to swallow everything up. "It's Nia Baraja. I've come to visit." "Where are you?" she called into the dark, but there was no answer. Was she sleeping? She tried calling again, more loudly this time, but as expected, nothing. Nia walked forward, determined. This was a 2-story house. It probably had a fair number of rooms, but it wouldn't take very long to check them all. And maybe with her keen sense of hearing, she would pick up a sound before that even became necessary. The search began with the first floor. Just as she was about to proceed, someone shouted from right next to her, and a face appeared in the light. Her shoulders jerked, and she instinctively recoiled from the face. Her back hit a wall. She couldn't have overlooked it. If she didn't know better, she would have sworn the face had come through the wall. Nice reaction. When Nia looked with her tear-filled eyes, it was the demon maid who was looking back at Nia's panic with no expression. Stupid demon, Nia grumbled resentfully without thinking. It seemed her crown of psychic defense wouldn't protect her from surprise. Her heart was beating an alarm bell and felt like it was about to burst. Maybe that had been the demon's aim in the first place. That couldn't be, could it? So why are you here? I wanted to talk to you. In 2 days, will be. She didn't know how far she could trust this maid. Maybe it was dangerous to discuss the details of the plan. Going on a mission together. Okay. So I thought it would be good to exchange info and find out what each other can do. It's important to exchange info. Understood. Whether Nia would really share anything depended on how their talk went. Then come this way. The demon maid walked off at a brisk pace. It didn't seem to matter if there was light where she was going or not. So the paladin had been telling the truth. Following after her, Nia observed the maid from behind. Delicate limbs, regular features, she was a pretty little girl who would stimulate anyone's desire to protect. But to Nia, who knew her true identity, it all seemed like a ruse. Here, the maid wasn't bound by the chains she had been wrapped in when she visited Caspion's chamber. Well, the chains served no purpose in the first place. This demon only took the form of a little girl. She was actually a monster stronger than a dragon. Thinking about how even being lightly patted might kill her gave Nia stomach pains. I'm squishy, so please be gentle with me. In reaction to that murmur, the demon maid stopped, turned only her head, and said, I know. Even with her exceptional eyesight, Nia couldn't detect any change in the maid's expression. Not knowing what she was thinking made her a little anxious. She was led into a sitting room. The only light was a single candle. Sit. Nia sat in the opposite chair as the maid's gesture indicated. A drink. A bottle filled with a tea-colored liquid appeared. She had produced it in the same way the King of Darkness sometimes took things out of nowhere. While she was still marveling, the maid took the lid off and put a straw inside. It was made out of a material that seemed somehow both hard and soft. The liquid was syrupy, but Nia wanted to believe it wasn't poison. There would be serious issues if the demon suffered some lapse and forgot which drinks were harmful to humans. But when she thought that this maid might actually be in the service of His Majesty, she couldn't refuse, so she made up her mind to take a sip. Putting some in her mouth, she rolled it around on her tongue. There was no shocking bitterness, no sharp stimulation. It's sweet? What is this? Nia had another sip and then another. It took a little doing to suck up the thick liquid, but it was freezing cold and delicious. It's chocolate flavored. A bit high calorie, about 2,000. But don't worry about that. One of the great ones once said that growing fat on delicious food is every woman's true wish. She was talking a bit differently, so Nia looked at her face, but her expression hadn't changed a bit. Great one made Nia think of the king, but she seemed to be talking about someone else. Would you like to have another? May I? She had drunk it so fast, she was sad it was gone, and the maid must have noticed. She produced another one. Nia was like many other women, despite the orc's uncertainty, in that she didn't want to partake if it meant gaining weight, but the drink's container wasn't very big, so the portion wasn't very large. It only made sense that if you ate a lot you would get fat, so she figured she could cancel it out later with a light dinner. I don't know what high calorie means or if 2,000 is a lot, but she said a bit, so it's probably fine. This time she decided to savor the sweetness that was distinct from the taste of fruit or honey. She took a sip. Wait. This is getting me all mixed up. I came here to talk. With the straw in her mouth, sipping in the same way Nia was, the demon maid signaled with her eyes that she should continue. First, if you have a name, could you tell me what it is? My name is Nia Baraja. Please call me whatever you like. She had heard from Evil Eye of the Blue Roses that the maids all had different appearances and equipment. And in reality, the two maids who had appeared in Caspion's room had been completely different from this one. Maybe they were like goblins and hobgoblins in that different types of demon maids had different names. There wasn't really any need to know her individual or group name, but if this was really a subordinate of the King of Darkness, then it was natural for Nia, as his attendant, to treat her with that much courtesy. You can call me Shizu. I'll call you Nia. Shizu? Nia had expected to be called human, so she was somewhat surprised. So this demon maid's name is Shizu? Or is that her type? Well, it doesn't really matter, but... Is that your individual name? Individual name? What a wild question. Yes. It's my name. I beg your pardon. I don't know much about demons, NRGH demon. That's NRGH, Shizu was grumbling under her breath. Of course, with Nia's hearing, she could make out what was being said, but it sounded like Shizu was talking to herself, so she didn't press her on it. So, Shizu. What can you do? And it seems like there were a few demon maids, so why did His Majesty, the King of Darkness, choose you? I'm good at attacking from a distance. And I was the best. The best? I see. Because you were the hardest to handle during the fight? Shizu chuckled triumphantly, and it probably looked like her expression didn't change at all. But Nia, with her excellent eyesight, could tell. It was an extremely small change, but the maid's face looked slightly proud. At the same time, Nia was relieved. This maid hadn't been chosen because she was the weakest. I can use projectiles a bit. But I'm not as good at close quarters combat. We don't have anyone to be our front line. Shizu said nothing and just sipped her drink. Do you have any good ideas? What is the mission? We need to sneak into a city and rescue a VIP. Nia refrained from saying the words Ruin. Then what we need are stealth abilities. It's better not to have a noisy vanguard. Yeah. You're right. Can you operate quietly, Nia? I've trained a bit, so I think I've improved. But if you asked whether I feel perfectly competent, I'd be hard-pressed to say yes. You don't have any spells like invisibility? No enchanted items? Nia shook her head. Then do your best. Yes. I will. So, can I really trust her, and believe that she works for the King of Darkness? If she was only feigning loyalty to the King of Darkness in order to spy for Jaldabaoth, it would be bad to tell her about His Majesty's situation. But Nia felt there was a good chance the King of Darkness really could have stolen the maid away from Jaldabaoth. In that case, if she didn't trust her, it would be like throwing away a secret weapon. So she hesitantly began to explain. In our lands, I was the attendant to His Majesty. Shizu's almost artificially beautiful face didn't move. I've heard about your nasty eyes. And that he lent you a bow. A rune bow. Let me see it. Jaldabaoth was interested in it, too, Nia thought in a corner of her mind, but if this maid was serving the King of Darkness, she couldn't say no. Nia handed over the bow, and Shizu examined it. After a quick look, she gave it right back. This is splendid. You should show it off to more people. The maid spoke so calmly, Nia couldn't help but feel she was reading prepared lines. Or maybe it was only her imagination, because she didn't get the feeling the maid had been looking at the bow with real interest. Or maybe she talked like that because this was their first time meeting. Thank you, right. And when we're done with the mission, Shizu put a hand up to interrupt. You should show it off to more people. Why is she repeating that? Perhaps the question showed on her face, because Shizu continued. You should let everyone know that Lord Ainz is the kind of great being who can lend out a splendid rune bow like that. Hearing Ainz made Nia flinch. This was something she had to address urgently. His Majesty, the King of Darkness. From Shizu's lack of expression, she gathered that she hadn't explained well enough, so she continued. It's His Majesty, the King of Darkness. Isn't calling him Lord Ainz a bit overly familiar? This time Shizu's face flinched. No, at a glance, she was expressionless. But Nia was sure she had seen some movement. It's not overly familiar at all. No, it is. Normally, you call someone like that by their exalted title, not their name. You've only just started working for him and haven't even been of any use yet. What's that look for? Nothing. But I'm calling him Lord Ainz, not His Majesty, the King of Darkness. Was the faint emotion on her face pity? Or was she gloating? Nia wasn't sure, but it irritated her. It was incredibly offensive that this newcomer could appear out of nowhere and speak the name of the one she worshipped like they were close. It was time to take the mask off. As the king's attendant and a representative of the sacred kingdom, she had intended to treat her with respect, but she was over it now. It didn't matter that this maid was a matchless terror. She had to be made to understand. Listen, you, I was told to call Lord Ainz Ooal Gown Lord Ainz. So I can call him Lord Ainz. I'm allowed to. The shock of the implication, but you aren't, made Nia lightheaded. Then again, this was a demon magically controlled by the King of Darkness. Maybe this attitude was to be expected. No, that can't be. You're lying. How natural for a demon to lie. He wouldn't have had time to specify little things like that. Shizu sighed and shook her head in an "oh, brother" way. Unfortunately, for you, it's the truth. Well, I understand what a shock it must be. I really do. But that's simply your status right now. If you work hard for him, though, someday you'll be able to call him Lord Ainz, too. It requires devotion. Shizu. Nia. Those who come before are tasked with leading those who come after. That was a grand statement to make for someone who had come after. Although if she was allowed to call him Lord Ainz, then maybe she was in the superior position here. There was still something that didn't sit right with Nia, but for the moment. For now, I'll go ahead and say thanks. It's nothing. We should be compassionate toward anyone who comprehends Lord Ainz's greatness. Nia's eyes bulged in surprise. How had he gained her respect so fully in such a short time? No, it didn't need further explanation. The King of Darkness was simply that amazing. Yeah. Of course I know how great His Majesty is. After Nia answered, they stared at each other for a little while. Shizu was the first to move. She extended her right hand. Nia responded without hesitation. It did bother her that Shizu kept her gloves on, but they shook hands across the table. If she reveres His Majesty that much, she must be under his control. If she wasn't, she wouldn't call him Lord Ainz, that would be suspect. She would call him His Majesty, the King of Darkness like me. Was she being naive? Nia was firmly convinced that Shizu's allegiance was real. Something seemed to click into place. They were able to understand each other like two worshippers of the same god. We get along surprisingly well. You have some admirable qualities for a human. I admit I have complex feelings about getting along with a demon. We only get along because what you're saying is correct. It's just because you think the King of Darkness is wonderful, that's all. Shizu nodded, thinking over Nia's argument. Before, I didn't care what would happen to you, but I'll get you back here safely. I promise. Thanks. Her gratitude was genuine. Difficulty level 150. She would be protected by a demon even the Blue Roses were forced to admit they had little chance of defeating. That deserved a thank you. Doubly so when said by a subordinate of the King of Darkness. But she wanted to confirm one thing. Do you swear on His Majesty's name? Shizu raised a hand, like a student getting called on by a teacher. I swear on the name of the ever-sacred Supreme One, Ainz Ooal Gown. But if you die and I revive you, that counts, right? As safe. Not quite, they exchanged looks. Nia felt that dying and being resurrected were far from safe, but she stated the compromise she was willing to make. Maybe if I'm revived as a human and not an undead or a demon, it can count, Then there's no issue. Good. Shizu had been speaking in a monotone this whole time, but her tone changed slightly. It was like she had added some emphasis. You're not cute, but you can have this. She took something out and came next to Nia. Then she stuck the thing to Nia's forehead. What? What is this thing? Startled by the weirdness of the act, Nia tried to pull the thing off, but it was stuck. It was stuck fast. Nia was terrified. What the heck? Wait. This is so freaky. You're fine. It doesn't hurt, and it's not scary. Here. Shizu showed her an item that had the number 1 and some other symbol, maybe a letter, written on it. It was extremely glossy paper, and the thing on her forehead felt slick to the touch as well. Nia had heard of talismans before, so was this a contact art using one of those? Whatever it was, surely she wouldn't give it to her for no reason, so was it enchanted? That's what gave Nia the creeps. Is this going to be stuck to my head my whole life? Why did you stick it to my forehead? Couldn't you have put it somewhere else? You're like my little sister. She felt like she had heard something unexpected, but there were higher priority matters at hand. More importantly, get it off. At least stick it somewhere else, like on my clothes. What a hassle. Shizu took out a little bottle and dripped something on Nia's head. The thing peeled off so simply, it was as if it had never been firmly stuck in place. She looked at it and saw it was indeed the same thing Shizu had showed her. It's a sticker. You're supposed to put it somewhere you can see it. Apparently, she had to put it somewhere. Making Shizu mad wouldn't help Nia. Her only choice was to do as the maid said. Okay, are we done talking? No, I also wanted to talk about searching for the King of Darkness, that is, going to get him. I'll go, too. There is lots of prep to do, but once it's done, really? I promise. But I want you to take time to help finish the subhuman map of the hills. Right. Subhuman? For a moment after agreeing, she felt strange. She hadn't said anything yet. So why did the maid mention subhumans? Maybe, she heard from Master Caspond that the king might have fallen in the hills? What's wrong? Okay. I'll talk to my superiors. Thanks, Nia. Thank you, Shizu. The sticker was still on her mind, but she held out her hand, and Shizu took it. They shook again. You don't believe His Majesty is dead either, right? Shizu's eyes went round. What are you talking about? He fell in the east, and we haven't heard from him since then. Considering he still hasn't come back even though he can use teleportation magic, some kind of accident might have happened. So, maybe it hurt too much to say the rest. She hesitated, because it felt like if she put it into words, it would be true. Shizu responded with what was probably annoyance. He's fine. He's not dead. The fact that I'm under his control is proof of that. What are you crying about? The tears fell on their own. The King of Darkness was really alive. She had believed that he wasn't dead. But there were nights she couldn't sleep when worry would consume her mind. All sorts of people had told her he was fine. But their comments all sounded like consolations only said to assuage everyone's fears, not something they actually believed. Just now, however, Shizu's confident words, brimming with conviction, and her presence as proof of the King of Darkness's survival, gave Nia peace of mind. As relieved as a lost child who had finally found her parent again, she couldn't stop crying. Shizu pressed some cloth, the same fabric as her scarf, probably a handkerchief, against Nia's cheeks. Then she rubbed. It was more unpracticed than violent, but for the one getting her tears wiped away, it hurt nonetheless. When the handkerchief moved, a string of mucus went with it, forming a bridge. There's snot on it. That's quite a shock. Hearing Shizu's clearly scandalized voice, Nia wasn't sure what expression to make. So she dug in her pocket and broke the slimy bridge with her own handkerchief. I'll wash it. Getting into Karenshaw Castle was simple. All they had to do was hide in barrels and get transported in as cargo. Of course, there would be an inspection, but there were other barrels, 8 in all, so one of those could be opened. The reason such lax security went unchecked stemmed from the fact that the Subhuman Alliance was such a diverse gathering of races. It was a group of people with different common sense due to their varying cultures. If they had a common value, it was that combat strength was absolute. So if someone strong pushed for something, it would be granted even if it required bending the rules. For subhumans, strength was like a peerage based on violence. Lower-ranked beings had no choice but to submit. In other words, if a strong Zeruan gave a hard stare, the inspection would be abbreviated to the greatest extent possible. Eventually, the barrels were placed on the floor with a thunk. Then there was a knock on the top, bam. That was the sign that they had reached the designated location. Nia followed their plan and counted out 3 minutes. During that time, through the barrel staves, she heard the Zeruan who had brought them there open the door and go somewhere. After the 3 minutes were up, Nia pressed up on the inner lid. It slanted, and though the big slab of raw meat stuck to it didn't fall on her, smaller chunks rained down. This barrel had 2 bottoms. Nia was in the lower compartment, and the raw meat was above her. The reason they had used raw meat instead of wheat or vegetables was to mask the body odors of Nia and Shizu in case of a subhuman guard with a keen sense of smell. She was probably lucky that their preparations had been unnecessary. Except the part where she was covered in blood and other raw juices. Slowly removing the barrel's lid, she looked outside. Having scanned the room, it was dark, but there was a small magic-seeming light, and confirmed that no one else was around, she stepped out of the barrel. The room was a pantry. The shelves were lined with various foodstuffs and jars, and there were other barrels besides those just brought in. It took some doing, but once she was out, she stood the inner lid up inside the barrel to make it easy to get back in when she returned. Depending on how things went with the prince's rescue, she would be traveling out again in this same barrel. Nia wondered about her co-infiltrator and saw that Shizu was coming out of her barrel, too. She was shorter than Nia, so she had a bit of trouble exiting the large barrel, but the maid had more physical strength than Nia or even Remedios. Before Nia could offer assistance, she was out. "Miss Shizu. You have some meat in your hair." Shizu was miffed. Her expression may not have changed, but that didn't mean she lacked emotions. Whether it was thanks to her efforts to see Shizu frequently before they left or that she had trained her powers of perception on the King of Darkness's skull expressions, Nia had come to have at least a vague grasp of what sort of mood the maid was in. Shizu tried to pluck the bit of meat from the back of her head, but it was really stuck. "I was always taught that short hair was better in combat because your enemy might pull longer hair, but now I see there are other advantages to keeping it short." Nia went over to Shizu, took all the meat out of her hair, and tossed it into the barrel. "Thank you. I'm never infiltrating anywhere like this ever again. We still have to escape." Shizu shot a glance of disgust at her and then took a towel out of nowhere to wipe her hands. Then she gave one to Nia. The moist towel was softer than any Nia had ever touched and so silky. It had to have been awfully valuable. How did she get a hold of an item like that? Were there lots of similar things in the demon world? Her questions were endless, but she wiped the meaty stickiness from her hands and then used the clean part of the towel to wipe off Shizu's hair. It wasn't much more than a symbolic gesture, but it still probably felt better than nothing. "Thanks." "You're welcome." While Nia was doing that, Shizu took out her weapon. It was an unusually shaped projectile weapon called a mana gun. It used magic power to shoot bullet-like arrows, so it was sort of similar to a crossbow. Shizu also explained that there was no combustion reaction like with something called gunpowder, but Nia didn't understand what she was talking about, so she let it go in one ear and out the other. She had wanted to see how it worked, but Shizu hadn't been authorized to go outside, so her combat ability was a mystery. Still, if she was difficulty level 150, then Nia probably didn't need to worry. In the same way, she took ultimate shooting star, Super and Nia's quiver out of space and handed them over. And Nia returned the dirty towel. At first, they had debated how to sneak Nia's bow in. Between its length and all the ornamentation that would get caught on things, they also wouldn't be able to get the inner lid on if they put it in a barrel. So if the barrel was opened, that would have been the end of it. Another idea had been to have the transporting Zeruan equip it, but it was such a splendid piece of gear that it was likely to stick in people's minds. If the rescue failed, the bow would then link the Zeruan to the attempt, so they rejected the plan. Finally, it was starting to look like she might just leave it behind, when Shizu had said she could carry it for her by storing it in the mysterious space where she kept her own weapon. She was both anxious to be carrying the precious item she borrowed from the King of Darkness into a dangerous situation and relieved to not have to part with it. Amid those swirling emotions, Nia expressed her deepest gratitude to Shizu for her kindness. Apparently, that was the moment she really became the junior of the duo, and after that, Shizu often emphasized her seniority. The Miss Nia had to add before her name was part of that. If she left it off, Shizu's mood noticeably soured. Pretty Shizu's annoyed face, which looked no different compared to her usual expression at a glance, but Nia could tell, was actually more adorable than anything else, but Nia refrained from telling her that. After readying their weapons, they set off with Shizu in the lead. At the door, they listened for any sounds outside, but there didn't seem to be anyone. Okay, let's go. They didn't have much time, so Nia nodded. Rather, the Liberation Army was approaching Karanshaw in coordination with their infiltration and rescue operation. The capture of Karanshaw would begin soon. The plan was for Nia and Shizu to sneak into Karanshaw Castle and rescue the Zeruan prince. Then the Liberation Army would approach Karanshaw and attack when the moment was right. If the rescue was a success, the Zeruan would cooperate from the inside. If the rescue failed, the guidance and gate opening the Zeruan would have helped with fell to Nia and Shizu. But there were a lot of things, so whatever they could manage would be good enough. That was the rough outline of the operation. The fact that once they rescued the prince, even if they were forced to hole up somewhere, they could count on help from the Liberation Army and the Zeruan was major. It benefited the Zeruan, too. If things went well, they would be able to get the prince out of the city to keep him even safer. In other words, a smooth retaking of Karanshaw depended entirely on the prince's rescue succeeding. With the sudden weight on her shoulders, her stomach pained her, the whole thing made Nia groan. But that was why they didn't have time. Once the battle started or the Liberation Army was spotted, security would tighten up. As they had planned, Shizu took something like a perfume bottle out of space and spritzed herself and Nia. It was a consumable with the same effect as the Tier 1 spell Odorless. Apparently, it needed to be conserved because she didn't have many. She cracked the door open, peeked out, and then slipped through. They had referred to the castle plans to decide a route and discussed ahead of time how to handle various scenarios and how they would divide up the tasks involved. When Nia went out, she closed the door behind her, taking care not to make any noise. Then she ran after Shizu. I'm not going to be any help at all. To be frank, Nia could only think of herself as a burden in her current circumstances. One glance at Shizu's gait was enough to convince her. Her steps were as soft, or even softer, than those of Nia's father moving through the forest. She had skills. She has human-like skills even though she's a demon. I guess it's just scary that you can't tell what she is from looking. Really, everything could have been left to Shizu, but in addition to having Nia there to supervise. The Sacred Kingdom probably also felt it looked good to have one representative from their country along with the representative from the Nation of Darkness. The corridor was dark. It was nighttime. Moonlight filtered through the windows. Or perhaps, there was only moonlight was more accurate. In other words, there were no torches or magic lights in the corridor. Most subhumans weren't bothered by the dark. But apparently, some had better night vision than others. Some could see perfectly, but others could just make things out decently enough. so Nia and Shizu avoided the moonlight and raced along from shadow to shadow. As a human, Nia really had to keep her wits about her. Not only was it so dark that she couldn't see, but the guards on patrol didn't carry lights either, so it was impossible to spot them from a distance. The reason for the light in the pantry wasn't clear, but it might have been for one of the races that couldn't see in the dark. The pair ran as fast as they could, keeping their footsteps noiseless. The pace got Nia breathing hard, but for Shizu, who had physical strength far surpassing that of Remedios, it probably didn't even count as a jog. Sometimes they came upon a guard and had to wait with bated breath until the subhuman had passed. They couldn't kill anyone. It would have taken too much effort to deal with the body and erase any traces. They were in the middle of enemy territory, so the best-case scenario would be if no one noticed they were there until after the rescue was complete. Thankfully, they were able to proceed without anyone discovering them. The reason the castle was so sparsely protected was that guards were also needed for the wall, the lookout towers, and the prison camp inside the city. The Zuruen had explained that since the King of Darkness had killed so many subhumans, they weren't able to properly staff the perimeter, and security at the castle wasn't very tight. Thanks to that research performed ahead of time by the Zuruen and the perfect arrangements they had made, things were going smoothly, but Nia was anxious. There were two hurdles in the operation. One was the long corridor on the way to the spire. The other was the walkway leading to the spire, the skybridge. There wouldn't be anywhere to hide in either place, and the areas would most certainly be guarded. And it wasn't just one guard but multiple. Apparently, they had one standing away from any lines of fire in case of ranged attacks. They had discussed as a group Gustav's sketch of the castle plans, but these two critical junctures simply had to be overcome. Using invisibility to take care of sight and the silent spell priests can use to take care of sound would allow us to infiltrate perfectly. I see why adventurers who can form versatile teams are so valuable. Eventually, the pair reached their destination. Their first hurdle was the long corridor, and if they simply walked straight down it, the guards would spot them before they managed to get very far. They needed to move into a position from which they could line up their shots before being discovered. To do that, they had come to the room directly above the guard's position in the corridor. From there, they would rappel down the outer wall using a rope, creating a bypass. Here? Nia compared their position to the map in her head and nodded that it was the right spot. Nice work. Momentarily praising her junior as the senior member of the duo, Shizu put her ear to the door, then swiftly opened it without a sound. The room was filled with miscellaneous items, and it seemed like it hadn't been used in a long time. There was a thick layer of dust on the floor, only disturbed by the Zuruen who had come to investigate. The tracks moved between the window and the huge shelving unit. Shizu reached into her mystery pocket and took out a rope the same color as the outer wall. Then she attached it to the shelving unit. In order to test if it would support their body weight, she yanked on the rope with all her might, and there was no sign of the shelves moving or breaking. It was less thanks to the size, which came with the weight of the shelving unit itself, and more the spider nest-like object plastered to it. The Zuruen who visited the room had glued it in place using some sticky thread from a spiden. The window opened easily. Shizu stared down at the wall and made sure there were no guards patrolling in view, then slung her weapon over her shoulder and said, "I'll go first." She went out the opening and slid down the rope to the window below. Supporting her weight with one hand, she pushed at the window with the other, and it swung open with no trouble. That had also been prepared in advance by the Zuruen. Shizu slipped inside. The whole feat took only a few seconds. After confirming the safety of the room below, she poked her head out and waved to Nia. Nia grabbed the rope and leaned out the window. The window was only a little over 10 feet below, but her current position was a few hundred feet above the ground. If she fell, she would definitely die. No, it would be worse if she somehow survived. She would be tortured for sure, and after they extracted what intelligence they could from her, her tormentors would kill her. It would be better to die on impact. The rope had knots every so often for handholds, and in the practice runs she had done, there hadn't been any problems. But the real thing was completely different from training. I don't want to go. Nevertheless, she had to use the rope to get to the floor below. If there had been a balcony, she could have just jumped, but alas. Gripping the rope tightly, she pulled her entire body outside. She didn't forget to cross her legs around the rope. All she had to do now was inch her way down. The surface is just below me. The surface is just below me. Putting that idea in her head, she descended without looking down. Her weight shifted from her right hand to her left, just as she had practiced. But her body swayed in the wind. It was blowing much harder than it had during her training. Come on, you can do it. Go, me. I'm sure Shizu was even more frightened. The room's window had been unlocked thanks to the Zeruin. But if someone had gone in afterward and locked it again, Shizu would have been forced to climb back up the rope. Compared to that, knowing she had to only make a one-way trip made it easier on Nia. Eventually, she reached the window. Shizu reached out to grab her and used her incredible strength to pull her inside. Thanks. But you took too long. I'm going to clean up. 1 second. Shizu leaned out the window and aimed her mana gun. When Nia held the rope as instructed, there was a sound like escaping air, pushed, and some tension on the line. Shizu had cut the rope with her weapon. They recovered the severed rope and tossed it into a corner. They had taken it down because they wouldn't be using this route to return, but there were pros and cons to that plan. The pro was that they would avoid being detected by the subhumans patrolling outside. The con was that if for some reason their retreat plan had to be changed, returning here to climb up a floor was no longer an option. In the end, they had decided that con outweighed the pro. All done, Miss Shizu. So now we're about to clear our first hurdle, we go. And kill for sure. Can you do it? Yes, I think so. When they exited this room, they would be perfectly positioned with a direct line of sight to the guard. Unless they could kill him in a single blow, before he could cause a disturbance, the whole plan would fall apart. Nia took her bow, knocked an arrow, and drew the string back. Shizu held her mana gun up, too. I'll go left. You go right, Miss Shizu. Shizu made an okay sign with her fingers. Then they looked each other in the eye, and Shizu pushed open the door. Their eyes met those of a subhuman right nearby, not even 5 yards away. He had no idea what was going on or who they were. He wasn't even surprised, just uncomprehending. Nia loosed her arrow. Shpuck. The arrow pierced his forehead easily. Got him. Nia had skills, but she owed much of the success to Ultimate Shooting Star, Super. Thank you, Your Majesty. While Nia was skewering one subhuman's head, Shizu was blowing half of another's away with her mana gun. The guards collapsed, causing a louder clamor than expected. Dismayed, Nia listened hard for any subsequent sounds. Fortunately, she didn't hear anyone rushing their way. It seemed like no one had noticed what had happened yet. Hurry. They had divided up the work ahead of time. While Shizu was shutting the bodies up in the room where they had left the rope, Nia used an odorless item she had borrowed from Shizu. Then she splashed the strong alcohol she had put in her water pouch and washed away the blood, flesh, and brains. By the time the corridor reeked of alcohol, Shizu had come out of the room. She reached into thin air for an empty wineskin, poured some of the liquid from Nia's water pouch inside, quietly broke it, and then left it on the floor. Let's go. Okay. They had set up their little strategy, but when it came time for the guard to change, the new arrivals were likely to be suspicious. If they could have stuffed the corpses into Shizu's mystery space, that would have made things easier, but Shizu refused to do that, so they had to leave them in that room. Of course, that room had been set up in another way, but it didn't guarantee that the bodies wouldn't be found. It was best to assume they were on borrowed time. Eventually they reached the second hurdle. The mission was going as well as they could have hoped. They still had time, and they hadn't been discovered. Now it's a fight against time. I know. If I slip or something, you can ignore me. The walkway stretching from the castle to the spire was only the width of about 2 humans. There were no walls, it was completely exposed. Apparently, a handful of people had fallen, and looking at it now, Nia could see why. This skybridge was the final choke point for enemy invaders in a siege. A large army couldn't pass, so it neutralized any invading force's numerical superiority, and it introduced the danger of falling to one's death. With sentries wielding shields and spears holding the other end, the exposed walkway was a truly loathsome obstacle for the attacking side. It was probably only possible to brute force one's way through with a caster who could use fireball or some similar attack spell. Chipping away at the enemies with projectiles was a disadvantage due to their limited time and the fact that they would have to be stealthy about it. That was why they needed to charge, even though the enemy would probably respond with ranged attacks, and do away with the sentries at close quarters where they wouldn't have the benefit of cover. For that reason, they needed to close the distance as much as they could before being spotted by the guards in the lookout post. But when they took a closer look at the path, they found that the surface had been made uneven to slow people down, and in some places, it seemed like it was purposely built to cause invaders to trip and fall. This isn't safe at all. And if the enemies knock us back or cling onto us, we'll fall to our deaths. I have to be careful. Having steeled her resolve, Nia realized Shizu was watching her. Being stared at by Shizu with her pretty, doll-like features made her feel bashful even though they were both girls. What? I'll use it. Nia, you wait here. I'll take care of the guards at the entrance. Don't come out no matter what happens. Wait, what? Before she could even respond, Shizu was gone. She had disappeared. It didn't seem as if she had sped off somewhere. It was more like the Shizu who had been standing there dissolved into the air like a mirage. Nia was terribly confused. But Shizu had told her to stay put, so all she could really do was wait. Hiding near the entrance of the walkway, Nia focused her hearing to see if she could pick up any disturbances either toward the spire or behind her, back the way they came. After a few seconds, it seemed like something had happened at the lookout post. She could hear screams and the thuds of guards collapsing. When she looked over to see what was going on, she saw Shizu's face poke out of the lookout post. Shizu waved her over. Seeming annoyed at Nia standing there, still overwhelmed by wondering what had just happened, Shizu's waving grew more exaggerated until she was flailing her whole body around. At that point, she realized she had better go over there. It was pretty terrifying to cross the windy walkway, but Nia kept her body low and her eyes on her feet. When she arrived, the lookout post was emitting the stench of blood. Several expired subhumans were lying strewn about. In the middle of it all stood Shizu with her usual blank expression. Her right hand was clasped around a sharp-looking knife stained with blood. In her left hand was her mana gun. Clear. We move on. Okay. I can't disappear anymore today. We need to be careful. Understood. Nia could tell Shizu didn't feel like explaining, so she followed her without questions. That's a demon made for you, thought Nia. She never would have made it this far without Shizu. I owe this to His Majesty, the King of Darkness, for ordering her to help us. Even when he was absent, her respect for him only grew. The fact that he was undead was really such a trivial issue. I really have to let everyone know how great he is. The spire was made almost entirely out of stone and only had narrow windows, so it was even gloomier than the main castle. The corridor was fairly broad, so Nia and Shizu could walk side by side. It was built in a spiral that led up along the wall. Their object, the Zeruan Prince, was supposedly being kept somewhere near the top, so they only listened for sounds on the other sides of the doors they passed on their way higher and higher. About 2 loops up, Shizu raised her hand in a signal to stop at about the same time that Nia heard the footsteps of a creature. It appeared to be wearing armor, as the sound was metal clanking against stone. Just one, Miss Shizu. Yes, but those footsteps are heavy. Nia wasn't sure, but if Shizu said so, then it must have been true. She must have meant it was bigger than a human. What should we do? Should we go back and hide inside one of the rooms we passed? We've come this far. We kill it. Okay. Following Shizu's lead, Nia readied her bow. She was prepared to shoot as soon as the creature showed itself. They had been told that the Zeruan prince was the size of a human child. And he wouldn't be wearing metal armor. As soon as the hulking form appeared around the bend, Nia and Shizu both attacked without hesitating. The arrow and mana bullet appeared to sink into the giant body. The large creature staggered and then began to retreat up the path. All it had to do was backtrack slightly to break Nia's and Shizu's lines of sight. If this subhuman could take the pair's attacks, especially Shizu's, and still be alive, it had to be quite strong. Who are you people? A scream came from up the corridor. What should we do, Miss Shizu? Twiddling our thumbs here won't do us any good. Let's close in and attack before our opponent summons all the guards in this spire. Got it. Nia and Shizu sprinted forward. Since their opponent had been able to weather their surprise attack, Nia figured it was safe to assume it was the guard, the VAM, because all ogre types had not only excellent combat ability but impressive physical strength. As they ran, Nia felt almost as if the amount of moisture in the air was increasing. It smelled like rain. What are humans doing here? When they closed in, they had a full view of the huge subhuman. He had an air of violence similar to an ogre, but appeared to be much more intelligent. His skin was a pale blue, but rather than looking unwell, it gave the being an evil impression. His forehead had one horn sprouting out of it. In his hands was a mace larger than Nia. With that appearance, he certainly resembled a VAM. Even if he wasn't quite on Boozer's level, he would be a difficult opponent. The magic bullet and arrow from their previous attack had been direct hits, yet he had no visible injuries. And Nia didn't smell any blood, which meant he probably wasn't concealing any with illusions. How had he neutralized their attacks, especially Shizu's? You came here to kill me? Seems like even some humans are in the know. He seemed thrilled. Then maybe it was best to let him think no, Shizu said, firing her gun. Something shot out with a push of escaping air. Part of the VAM's body dispersed, and the bullet flew right through it. Projectiles won't work on me. Nia loosed an arrow at his brow, but sure enough, his head turned to mist, and the arrow stuck into the wall behind him. It's futile. Futile, I say. Fear me, the mortal enemy of any sharpshooter, and die. So you have perfect resistance to all projectiles? At that strength? Shizu grumbled to herself. There must be something else going on. Nia looked to Shizu and shook her head. Unfortunately, the Zeruan didn't know the details of the VAM's powers. What are you blathering about? Fall back. The VAM closed in. He was so much larger than a human that Nia felt like her sense of distance had been completely ruined. She wouldn't be able to take a single hit from this guy, so she accepted Shizu's kindness and backed up. The VAM swung the massive mace at Shizu, who remained in front. It was like a gale force wind, but she evaded it with elegance. To wield a weapon as big as Shizu with one hand, he had to be extraordinarily strong. When the mace hit the floor, cracks radiated from the point of impact, and chips of stone went flying. It almost felt as if the huge tower had shaken. Nia shot an arrow. Though he was in close combat with Shizu, he was so much larger than her that if she aimed for his upper body, Nia could target him without hitting her. The arrow sliced through the air, but just as before, he turned to mist and evaded it. It's no good. It's pointless. I'm telling you, arrows won't work on me. You foolish woach. He was going to keep shouting at her, but Shizu interrupted. Shizu's prowess as a shooter far surpassed Nia's, but she didn't appear to be very skilled in hand-to-hand combat, and unfortunately, the VAM blocked her attack with his mace. Nia drew her bow again. Next, she aimed for the hand holding the mace. It was possible that he wouldn't drop his weapon even when he turned to mist, but she had decided that if there was even a slight chance, it was worth trying. And the result was that his arm turned to mist, but he didn't drop the mace. "Give it up, human." He thrust his free hand out at Nia. Water splash. A liquid missile flew at Nia. It struck her right shoulder, knocking her back so hard, she went sprawling. It hurt as much as if she had been punched with full force. Bones were possibly broken. Carefully attempting to move her right arm, she found herself able to without any issues. But pain zapped from her shoulder through the rest of her body. When she put a hand to the wound, she felt sopping wetness. At first, she was worried it was a massive amount of blood, but a moment later, she realized it was just water. "Making me use a wimpy spell like that," the VAM fairly spat, brandishing his mace. The gust of death that would have broken Nia to pieces, Shizu nimbly dodged as she muttered, "Why her? Why attack someone who posed no threat to you? It's incomprehensible." "You fool. Don't get. Are they actually effective? Is there a limit to how many times you can use that power?" The VAM's expression changed. In other words, that was the answer. "Nia." "Yep." Nia loosed an arrow. The VAM turned to mist and evaded. Then she shot another, and this time it hit him. The VAM yelped in pain, and Shizu said, "I see. So you can avoid projectiles 7 times. Is that, in one day? Or in 1 hour? It doesn't matter now. You will die here." Realizing he wouldn't be able to take Shizu out because of her brilliant evasion, seeing, in other words, that he would be one-sidedly attacked and killed, the VAM's face stiffened. "Why, you." Fog cloud. Fog billowed up. It was even thicker than the fog Nia had seen in the Nation of Darkness. She couldn't even tell where she was standing. She couldn't see Shizu's back ahead of her, yet she heard her mana gun going pisht, pisht. When she thought about it, the situation was actually quite simple. Even if he created fog in the middle of the corridor, he was still in the same place as a moment ago. She could just shoot at that area. Nia followed Shizu's lead and loosed an arrow. She was a bit nervous, so she aimed higher up to make sure she didn't hit Shizu. The arrow disappeared into the fog immediately, and then she heard it strike the wall. Apparently, she had missed. "He's behind you now." The remark from Shizu made Nia think, what? Considering the width of the corridor, the huge VAM wouldn't have been able to get around them without them noticing. But having traveled with her this long, Nia knew that Shizu was a trustworthy demon. Or perhaps it was less that she trusted Shizu and more that she trusted the King of Darkness, commanding her. Nia spun around, and sure enough, the fog was thick there, too, but she took a shot. The arrow hit the wall, just like the previous time. Where is he?" "He's in the direction you're facing. He must be trying to escape. Get down." Hearing what was a forceful voice for Shizu, Nia promptly got out of her way. "I'll switch bullets," and, full burst. There was a high-pitched ring, and then a boom, so loud Nia had to plug her ears, filled the corridor. Nia heard a blorg sound like vomiting and the crash of a large body crumpling. Then the fog dispersed, and the fallen VAM came into view up ahead in the curving corridor. Parts of his body had been blasted away, and there were marks on the walls. How was it possible to wield such a power? The subhuman tasked with guarding this place was supposed to be quite strong. And in reality, Nia hadn't seen any way to defeat him. Meanwhile, Shizu had killed him the instant her weapon specialty became effective. She really was a difficulty level 150 demon maid. "How did you?" "Well, I suppose with magic you can do anything." Nia moved the shoulder that had taken the attack spell. The heat of battle had caused her to forget about the pain, but it was starting to hurt more now. "Are you all right?" "Yeah. But it hurts to draw my bow, so my aim won't be very good." "Do you have a healing potion?" "No, but I have a healing item His Majesty lent to me." In the battle back then, she had been able to use it only once, but now she felt like maybe she could use it a little more. Still, she couldn't waste mana. It could end up that she would need to heal Shizu at some point. It's okay. All that's left is to rescue the hostage and escape. If you say so. Nia nodded and ran onward with Shizu. They had beaten the VAM who was supposed to have been so tough. All that was left was to collect the prince and make it back to the pantry they had started in. We're here. Yes. Upon reaching the top floor, Nia and Shizu exchanged glances. There was a single door. This had to be their destination. They nodded at each other and kicked it in. They were no longer in the mood to enter quietly. This was after their battle with the VAM. But they did move to either side of the door to be ready in case an attack came lashing out. But their caution was for nothing. So they rushed in, with Nia, her shoulder hurting, taking the left side and Shizu taking the right. The first thing Nia saw when she entered the room was a bed with a canopy. What had surely been originally snow white was stained with age. There was also a simple dresser and a plain wooden wardrobe as tall as a human. All the furnishings befitting a noble were old and banged up. They seemed less like antiques and more like second-hand acquisitions. At first glance, there didn't seem to be a subhuman in the room. When Shizu gestured with her jaw, Nia approached the wardrobe and opened the door. Of course, she stood off to one side so she would be safe whatever happened, and Shizu trained her mana gun on the inside. There's no one. Then they looked at the bed. After peering underneath to make sure no one was hiding there, Nia went over to it. There was a little lump. When she looked to Shizu, they nodded at each other, and Nia pulled the sheets down. There was a shiny, purple, almost attractive chunk of meat. No, perhaps it would be better described as a large maggot. It was about 3 feet long and had protrusions that couldn't quite be called legs. Shizu pointed her gun immediately, but Nia rushed to stop her. Wait. This is the Zeruan prince we're here to rescue. This thing is? That's what they had heard from the Zeruan messenger. But she could understand Shizu's doubt. She had been pretty confused when she heard the description, too. The Zeruan was a race of subhumans in which the royal family differed greatly in appearance from the others. Not only that, but perhaps there were also significant male and female differences? Can you speak, Zeruan prince? Sure I can. You don't seem to be my food, it was a boy's voice. When she took a closer look to see how he was speaking, she saw a little maggot-like mouth flapping. That is correct. We were asked to come rescue you. First, we'll get you out of this room. He may have looked like a maggot, but he was a prince. Nia had to treat him with the proper respect. They would also need his race's assistance when searching for the King of Darkness. She needed to make them feel indebted, not offend them. By my fellow spawn? Who? Who asked you to do it? It was a Zeruan called BBB. Is that someone you know? BBB? Ah yes. But if I leave this place, Jalda, Emperor Jaldabaoth, will be upset. That would put many Zeruan and our king in danger. I don't know all the details, but the reason we were asked to break you out was that the king has died, and they want to at least save you. No. It was absolutely impossible for Nia, a human, to read the emotions of this giant maggot prince. But she could hear the grief clearly in his voice. My one and only father. I see, that Jaldabaoth. In that case, is it possible to escape here safely? Your aides have made arrangements, so please consider it doable. I see. This is a rather shameless request to make of the human heroes who have come all this way to rescue me, but could we pretend that you dragged me out of here against my will? He must have meant if it came to that. Understood. That's what we'll say. I appreciate it. The prince raised his head. He was like a maggot rearing up, but that must have been a gesture of thanks for his race. Nia wrapped him in a sheet and put him on her back like one would a baby. She tied the ends of the sheet fast in front of her so that even vigorous movement wouldn't loosen the sling. The weight on her shoulder hurt. Wiping the sweat that had oozed from her forehead, she cast a spell. That instant, her wounds were completely healed. Now she would have no trouble running while carrying the prince. Do you feel all right? Please let me know straight away if anything hurts. I feel fine, but... You sure smell good. I'm starving. The words spoken into the nape of her neck made Nia shiver. What do Zurun eat? Shizu asked the question Nia would rather she hadn't. The bodily fluids of living things, alive or dead. A chill went up Nia's spine. I'll be mad if you pull anything weird with my protege. Don't worry. I'm not so hungry that I'd do something like that to a hero who came to rescue me. I haven't been allowed outside even once since coming here, but they have been feeding me properly. Nia felt like if she heard what kind of food he'd been eating she might want to hurl him to the ground, so she plugged her ears. Luckily, Shizu didn't ask any more questions. All right, time to go. Yes, ma'am. Thanks. With that brief exchange, the 2-3 of them were on their way. It wasn't as if they had time to stand around chatting while they were on a stealth mission. Fortunately, they made it back to the pantry with no trouble. Then Shizu raised a hand. There's someone in there. Please take care of them. Shizu readied her mana gun and threw the door open. Then she froze. She turned around. I don't know who they are, but there are Zurun in there. A lot of them. Perhaps it was the recovery team? More specifically, the group that was supposed to guide them outside. If they were already there, it must have meant that Nia and Shizu were running late. When they went inside, the 5 Zurun turned to look at once. Nia couldn't read the grotesque expressions even a bit, but when they all made the same motion in her direction, a wave of something that wasn't quite fear or disgust came over her. Nia undid the sheet and showed them the prince. Our prince. It was BBB. Without hearing their voices, it was impossible to tell them apart. They looked so different from the prince that it was impossible to even tell they were the same race. My kindred. I heard my father has died. I've realized that Jaldabaoth doesn't intend to keep his promise to us. But where can we run to if we betray him? He has taken over our territory completely, and one of his demons now governs it. Wouldn't escaping from here merely be going down the path to destruction? You're quite right to be concerned, Your Highness. But he only sees Zurun as slaves or livestock. Our valiant Bubibi lost some shoulder flesh for being slightly late to a gathering once. What? He did that to Bubibi? Nia gathered from the prince's shock that Bubibi must have been quite the Zurun. When this is all over, will there be a place for us under Jaldabaoth? We think not. Prince, there's no time. Let's disk, you fool. Could we do it after we flee? This is a borderline. Once we cross it, we'll have no choice but to follow through on that plan. There'll be no turning back. Tell me now. How are we going to return to our nest, to the hills, and survive? Well, the land is vast. I think we can find somewhere to hide. You think? You're leading our entire race down a path of destruction based on such a fuzzy prospect? Come up with something more realistic and concrete. Well, not everyone is devoted to Jaldabaoth. We could create a rebel army and... Idiot. It would just be annihilated by his aides. One ant might be overlooked, but an infestation can't be missed. Rebutted at every turn by the prince, BBB fell silent. Things were looking bad. They had come all this dangerous way to cooperate on this mission, but if the prince declared he didn't want to go, their efforts would be for nothing. Then Nia thought of a way to resolve the prince's worries. Then what if all the Zurun went to the Nation of Darkness? The Nation of Darkness? What in the world is that? It wasn't only the Zurun who turned to look at her, Shizu did, too. The hero who repelled Jaldabaoth back in the Riestai's kingdom, Mammon, is there. She had the feeling the Zeruen were staring at her, but she didn't know what sort of emotion was contained in their gazes. There was no way for a human to tell what a Zeruen was feeling. Is that true? That one remark made her realize what the Zeruen's silence was about. They must not have believed her. But that made sense. The more one learned about Jaldabaoth, the more impossible it seemed to drive him off. It is. I was told so by someone I trust. Actually, Miss Shizu? Yes. What Nia says is true. And so, this was the hard part. Nia psyched herself up. If you all went to the Nation of Darkness, I'm sure they would accept you as refugees. Refugees? There was a definite sourness in the prince's tone. But if you brought them news of their ruler, His Majesty the King of Darkness, I'm sure no one would look down on you. Wait. News of their own king would make them happy? What's that supposed to mean? The king is. Well, he's currently missing, that won't work, then. He could very well be dead. Please wait. It's impossible for the king to be dead. We have proof of that. When Nia explained how he might have fallen in the hills and they wanted the Zeruen's help, the prince fell silent. So that wasn't good enough? She thought, but she had already taken her best shot, so she didn't say any more. It was in the prince's court now. Still, even if direct assistance was impossible, they would surely fulfill their promise of sharing knowledge. I see. If we make them owe us, but will they accept subhumans? The Nation of Darkness is a human country, no? No, it's not. It's ruled by an undead. An undead? The prince yelped in shock, as did all the other Zeruen. You would have us go somewhere so dangerous? Every race had a strong aversion to undead. Nia had been no exception before she met the King of Darkness. Being confronted with herself from only a short while ago made her a bit emotional. Please wait. He may be an undead, but he's a wonderful person, and I saw humans and subhumans living in his country in harmony. An undead, a wonderful person? What do you take? Enough. Please bear with my rude retainer. But is this King of Darkness really as wonderful as you say? Yes, Nia answered confidently, standing proud. We can't understand human facial expressions at all. But you're brave enough to infiltrate deep into enemy territory to rescue me, so if you say it with such steady conviction, then I can understand. I will believe in this undead king, in whom you place such trust. Let's turn to him for help. Of happiness rose from the Zeruen. That's settled, then. Please flee to the Kingdom of Darkness as fast as you can, Your Highness. One problem is that one of Jaldabaoth's great demon aides has arrived. I thought he would be visiting a few days later. There will be trouble if he spots you. Hurry. Most Zeruen were female. Males were exceedingly rare. Really, just the king and the prince. If all the males in a tribe were wiped out, though females sometimes changed sex, the tribe would basically go extinct. They suggested the prince run first because they absolutely needed to get him somewhere safe, to the Kingdom of Darkness. One of Jaldabaoth's aides? Here? There was no way to overlook those words. Yes. You didn't see him? He has 3 demon aides. It's one of those. We'll defeat him here. At Shizu's sudden remark, the prince flip-flopped on the floor. Don't be ridiculous. If you two could save me, you must be quite strong. But that doesn't mean you can beat this demon. The only strong one was Shizu, but Nia didn't want to interrupt. We heard that he teleports among different cities. If he's here now, it's a great chance. If we let it go by, the next one might not come so easily. What you say is true, Prince. Let's be sensible. If we kill one of Jaldabaoth's aides, there will be a disturbance in the chain of command, so it would probably be difficult for them to detect us if we went straight from here to the Kingdom of Darkness. But is it really possible to defeat him? I don't know. But this is our chance. Then I'll make the wager, on your strength that killed the said the prince, who had been astonished to see the corpse on their way over. Okay, everyone? We're going to cooperate with these two and kill Jaldabaoth's aide. Yes, your highness. 2 humans. 6 of us. 8 who were enemies until a few days ago unite against a more powerful enemy. Sounds like a saga in the making, thought Nia, and counted the Zeruan in the room once more to make sure she wasn't mistaken before hurriedly interjecting, hold on. Please wait. Don't make the prince fight. We're here to save him. And more importantly, even if he did participate, what could he do? Putting it as kindly as possible, he was still just a big maggot on the floor. If he meant to go along as a figurehead, she would rather he spared them the trouble. You consider your job done as long as I escape? I see. But I think with my help it will be a bit easier to defeat Jaldabaoth's aide. No, without me, it would be quite difficult, even for heroes who beat a VAM. It was Shizu who had beaten the VAM, Nia couldn't claim any part in it, so it felt shameful to be counted as a hero. Do you mean without all of you, Zeruan? The prince emitted a strange cry. No, hero. I may not look like it, but I can use Tier 4 psychic magic. Tier 4? Nia was amazed. Tier 4 was what a human with genius-level aptitude could just barely reach if they devoted everything they had to the pursuit. In the Sacred Kingdom, only the High Priest Kalart Custodio and Holy Lady Kalka Besserez were capable of it. Nia turned, thinking to share her shock, but Shizu had her usual blank expression on. Perhaps, as might be expected from a difficulty level 150 demon maid, Tier 4 magic wasn't very surprising. Are Zeruan all that powerful? With another strange cry, the prince flopped around again like a fish out of water. I'm special. Yes. That's why he's the prince. Hearing the pride in his voice, Nia remembered something from a class she had taken long ago. Right, some other races have royalty that are so different from the common people that they are practically a different race. But I have a weakness. I'm not very quick. Yeah, thought Nia. That was clear at a glance. If he closes in on me, I'll die helplessly. So I hate to ask, but will you carry me? Then I can use magic on your signal. I see. I understand what you're asking, but couldn't the other Zeruan, your guards, carry you? Unlike the prince, we excel at close-quarters combat. You fight at range, correct? That's true. I suppose Shizu or I should CA. Wait, we're getting off topic. If we take His Highness into battle and he dies, that would be a huge problem. Nia. There's a point to him being there. That's why he's suggesting he go. That's right. Are you familiar with this aid of his? The demon like a dead tree decorated with trophy heads. There are several types of demons like that. In order of power, silk hat, crown, circlet, corolla. She counted on 4 fingers. The aid has to be one of those. But, if it's a silk hat, we should run for it. I can't beat those. You knew that? Nia was surprised, and then anger began to smolder. She had said during their prep meetings that she didn't know anything about the aid. Was that a lie? If she was purposely avoiding giving intelligence on Jaldabaoth to troops under the Sacred Kingdom, that would mean she was never under the King of Darkness's control. Which also meant that Shizu's mere presence would no longer be enough to calm her worries about His Majesty's safety. You went and gave me hope. But it was all just to make me feel better? Together with her outburst, she grabbed Shizu's shoulders. So hard. But it didn't seem like the demon maid sensed any pain. Not because she was expressionless, because she actually didn't feel any. Nia felt so pathetic, she nearly began to cry. What a fool I was, thinking we had managed to grow a little closer. She couldn't help but criticize herself. Shizu remained expressionless as usual. Still, there was something subtle there that only Nia could detect. Hesitation, thought, or perhaps regret. I'm sorry. The words Shizu forced out after a long silence were those. It was an apology so lacking in explanation that it only fueled the anger of the person it was meant for. But Shizu seemed somehow uneasy in that moment, which helped calm Nia down a little. I thought that if you knew how powerful his aides were, you would all decide not to take on this mission. But in order for Lord Ainz to achieve victory, this mission has to succeed. That's why I lied. Carefully selecting each word in turn, she took great pains to express her thoughts. But she was also sincere, and her unshakable faith made her reliable. Nia didn't have a technique for seeing through lies. And when she was talking to a demon, or really any girl with such a blank face, there was no way she could know what was the truth. But if Shizu really was a spy for Jaldabaoth or was secretly working to destroy the Sacred Kingdom military from the inside out, then her actions up to this point didn't make sense. She should have been able to integrate herself more skillfully. And regardless of the logic, Nia wanted to believe Shizu. Not only was she pointing the way to the King of Darkness, but the strange affinity they had for each other felt like something one of a kind to Nia. I see. I believe you. But don't misjudge me again. I would brave any danger for His Majesty, the King of Darkness. Shizu was visibly relieved. She couldn't possibly be a spy. She's simply not cut out for it. The thought brought a natural smile back to Nia's face. Okay, so can I keep our earlier conversation going? If you know so much, then do you know about his powers, too? These demons all have the same general type of powers, and they aren't that strong to begin with. They become an issue when they acquire the head of someone intelligent, a caster's head. According to Shizu, this branch of demons could accessorize with casters' heads and use their powers. Silk hats could equip up to 4, crowns, 3, circlets, 2, and corollas, 1. If the heads they wore belonged to accomplished casters, the danger these demons posed ramped up very quickly. Corollas can only use up to tier 3 spells, no matter what kind of head they use. Silk hats can use up to tier 10, and... Wait. Hold on. It was the prince and Nia. Shizu fell silent at the sound of their voices. Nia exchanged a glance with the bouncing prince. Though she couldn't read his expression, she was sure they were both thinking the same thing. Go ahead. What's this tier 10 you mention? Isn't 5 the highest? Exactly. Nia had heard that tier 5 was the upper limit. That was why she guessed that the King of Darkness could maybe use tier 6. Shizu shook her head as if she was about to sigh and say, here we go. There are 10 tiers of magic. The spell Jaldabaoth used to drop a meteor from the sky was from tier 10. But there's no way we can win against, so if His Majesty was fighting on an equal level with Jaldabaoth, does that mean? As Nia discovered something astounding, the prince shivered in amazement. Tier 10? That can't be true, can it? Tier 10. Really? And here I was proud of being able to use tier 4. Tier 4 was plenty commendable, he could definitely be proud of that. Only a handful of casters ever became that accomplished. Shizu, I'm just wondering. But can His Majesty also use tier 10 spells? Her tone was obviously annoyed at being asked something so basic. It was perhaps the clearest Shizu's emotions had ever come through during all the time they had spent together so far. The prince, as a caster himself, seemed to be jiggling in shock. What? The undead king of the country I'm about to flee to, is that awe-inspiring? Tier 10. That means twice as strong as me? Shizu sighed. His Majesty. You should call the king His Majesty. Oh yes, of course. His Majesty the King of Darkness is so awe-inspiring. Shizu was being pretty pushy, considering this was a prince of an entire race they were dealing with, but what she said was correct, and Nia approved wholeheartedly. That's right, Your Highness. His Majesty the King of Darkness is indeed awe-inspiring, yes. Prince, wouldn't it be great if you could get someone so amazing to owe you? Yes, you're right. Okay. We pledge our full support in the search for His Majesty in the hills. Nia clasped her hands and squeezed. Thank you so much, Your Highness. So, Shizu, can you explain the rest? About how amazing Lord Ainz is? Right now, we need to hear about Jaldabaoth's aid. But I want to hear about His Majesty, too, so will you tell me after we get back? Demons who equip multiple heads can use all of them together to cast several spells at one time. But there are limitations. One is that the same head can't cast 2 spells at once. The other is that there's a max cumulative tier restriction. For example, silk hats can cast spells that add up to 15 tiers. 15 tiers? Are there actually tier 15 spells? No, obviously not. I said it's cumulative. The prince wriggled in relief. Nia was a bit freaked out by the way she had learned to read the prince's emotions based on how he bounced around. Moving on. The important thing is how many heads the demon has. 2. 1 is subhuman. 1 is human like you too. Nia had a bad feeling. The body Jaldabaoth was carrying around. Its top half was missing. What was the human head like? Sorry, but I'm no good at telling apart people from outside my race. The other one I know, though. It's the Queen of the Pandexes, Grandmother. The words Pandex and Grandmother piqued her curiosity, but there were other things she had to ask at the moment. I'd like to inquire about the human head. What color is the hair? Hair is the furry part at the top of a human head, right? It's light black. Black? So it's not someone from the Sacred Kingdom? That provided her some slight relief. She had been worried for a moment that it would be the Holy Lady. Being able to rule that out put her mind at ease. She also realized it might be a hint for this puzzle. She had heard that black hair was common of people in the south. Thought Nia, because she presumed that was where Jaldabaoth had come from. There were no human majority countries south of the Sacred Kingdom. Less than half of the people were human, and even if there were humans, many of them were mixed with other races. She had heard that the only countries led by a purely human royal family were Sacred Kingdom Robel, Baharith Empire, and Riestai's Kingdom. There were no royal families in the Theocracy or the City-State Alliance. Perhaps that was why news of Jaldabaoth hadn't reached this majority human country. Incidentally, demons that accessorize with heads can't use the abilities of non-caster heads. Wearing a warrior's head won't give them warrior powers. There are different monsters who can do that. Then that subhuman head. Your Highness, could you tell us about the Grandmother? Sure. That's what I'm on your side for. Pandexes eat moss and look similar to us in both face and body. So like maggots. Nia trembled for a second, thinking how creepy a demon would be to wear a head like that. Was she a psychic caster? Yes, while I can manipulate the 5 elements of Yin, she could manipulate the 5 elements of Yang. Yin and Yang are in a bipolar relationship, they can neutralize and interfere with each other. I see. Shizu nodded. Having you with us will increase our chances of winning. I'm glad you understand. I, too, find the demon using the Grandmother in this way disgusting. Yes, because she was my first love. Prince? What? You fell for a member of a different race, it was just a little crush in my youth. I'm different now. It must have been a bittersweet tale, but to Nia, the first crush of a maggot was just unpleasant. So if our opponent has 2 heads, we can guess that it's a circlet. What's the cumulative number of magic tiers it can cast? The max would be 6. Incidentally, a crown can do 10. So if I used a tier 4 spell, they would have 2 tiers left to use. Of course, that assumes the demon is aiming to neutralize my powers, so we need to be careful, then we need to think about that human head. We don't have enough information. Nia? Sorry. I wish I knew about people with black hair, but I don't. I'm a bit surprised, though. I thought you might go to battle without worrying about it. Lord Ainz said collecting intelligence is important. I'd expect nothing less from His Majesty. It's a brilliant idea. In response, Shizu stretched out her hand. Nia took it unhesitatingly and shook up and down. You really get it. I should have given you a cuter sticker. You should grow fluffy hair. Sticker? If you mean the thing you stuck on me from before, I don't need another. Please give it to someone else you like. You're the first person who has ever disliked my stickers. Hearing she was the first surprised Nia. But then she wondered how many humans this demon had really hung out with. And there was also the possibility that everyone hated them in secret but wouldn't dare tell a demon. She wanted to point those things out, but she couldn't be so cold to a fellow devotee of the Great One. In the end, she settled for just wincing. If I remember correctly, humans, like Zeruan, don't grow fur. That's why they live in buildings like this. Digging a hole and living in it like we do isn't bad either. Prince, we're getting off topic. We don't have much time. Everything needs to be finished by the point the humans come to attack the city. Conclusion, the prince should come with us. No one disagreed. Well, Nia had been the only dissenter in the first place. In terms of tactics, we'll take the lead, but what should we do if a guard blocks our way? Leaving an opponent with casting abilities to roam freely would be quite dangerous. I'll fight them at close quarters. No one asked if she could. One of the people who had defeated the VAM, though it had been all Shizu, really, was saying so. No one would doubt her. Okay. Let's do that, then. Carry us in the barrels to near where the demon aid is located. If you say the demon ordered you to bring food, it'll probably work out, meant the prince, Nia, and Shizu. As long as those three weren't discovered, if they could proceed in secret, meaning that the Zeruan's betrayal wasn't found out, this would be doable. Shizu and Nia went back into the barrels they had been carried to the castle in. How lucky, Miss Shizu, right? Shizu poked her head out of her barrel. What is? I mean, everything is going so well. Thanks to the Zeruan rebelling, we were able to come save the prince, and Jaldabaoth's aid just happens to be here at the perfect time. If we defeat this demon, it'll be a great accomplishment, you know? No one will be able to argue with us anymore. It'll make it easy to form the search party for His Majesty. That's just a coincidence. Shizu's unusually forceful tone of voice weighed on Nia. Yeah. It's a coincidence, which is why it's lucky. Well, considering how powerful His Majesty, the King of Darkness, is and him making you belong to him, maybe it's not a coincidence. Belong to, Lord Ainz, did I make you sound like an object? It's fine. Nia. You're my favorite. You're not cute, but I think you're worth giving another sticker. It stings when you keep saying I'm not cute, though, you know, Nia thought as she declined the stickers and disappeared into her barrel. Though the Zeruan were stopped multiple times by other subhumans as they carried the barrels containing Nia, Shizu, and the prince, they managed to make it to a location near the great demon's office without a single barrel being opened. Nia and the others finally emerged from their barrels. Nia had been watching from inside for a while, and there was no sign of Titan security. It didn't seem like their infiltration and rescue of the prince had been discovered yet. Nia put the prince on her back, and while she strapped him into place and made other preparations, one of the other Zeruan requested an audience with the great demon aid, for reconnaissance purposes. Around the time everyone was ready to charge in, the Zeruan returned. He's alone. No guards. Nia frowned. With Jaldabaoth seriously injured, would one of his only 3 aides really not boost his security? Or had they lowered their guard because they thought the King of Darkness was dead? She had a lot of ideas, but the prince's next comment said it all. Then that makes it easier to kill him. Let's go. Everyone took that as the signal to proceed. When one of the Zeruan opened the door, Nia, who was standing right in the center of the group, could see clearly into the room. The office had a high ceiling, at least 15 feet, and was extremely spacious. Finely furnished, it was the classic image of a luxurious chamber. Behind a dark, massive desk, a grotesque monster raised its voice. A human? He started to say something. But Nia and her squad had no intention of chit-chatting. The prince on Nia's back immediately fired off a spell. Ainz Ooal, Raging Fireball. Just barely missing Nia, a small, feeble blaze shot into the room. On their way here, the prince had boasted about the power of Tier 4 attack spells. The fireball would explode on impact, so the idea was to get one off before they entered the room. But then, Ainz Ooal, Raging Fireball. The fire disappeared in midair as if it had been blown out in the wind. As I thought, the prince murmured bitterly. He didn't attack again. The first had been a test. If it hadn't been neutralized, he would have continued, but unfortunately that didn't work out. In order to not waste mana, it was probably best to use his magic to attack in coordination with the others. Is the one on the human's back a Zuruan? It doesn't look like you caught the humans and dragged them here. A rebellion, then? How fun. The demon who slowly stood looked like a human caricature straight out of a nightmare. First, he wasn't wearing any clothes, so his arms, long enough that they reached his knees, his legs, and his skin and bone body were all exposed. His withered frame was so thin that even Nia felt like she would be able to snap him in two, no problem. There wasn't anything that seemed like a head that she could see. From his shoulders came another set of shoulders. No, there was an awfully thinner than a woman's wrist, neck that rose up like a branch and carried 2 fruits. Was that his head? Nia yelped. The shock was so great, that was all she could say at first. Shizu had mentioned that circlets had 2 heads. One of them was grotesque, like a big maggot. It looked a lot like the prince, just as described. That had to be the grandmother. The issue was the other one. It was the head of a woman whose half-open eyes showed only the whites and whose mouth hung partially agape. But though her face was pale, not only had she not decomposed, but her blonde hair had even maintained its luster. Red flesh peeked out from the stump of her neck, and it looked so fresh, Nia practically expected blood to start gushing out. The fact that it seemed to have been recently ripped from its body could only be described as strange, but it was also the reason Nia knew who it was immediately. Lady Collard Custodio. She had only seen it from a distance, but there was no mistaking the highest-ranking priest in the Sacred Kingdom. Doubt swirled in Nia's mind. What did it mean? Was the Zuruan lying, then? Did they think that Nia and Shizu would run away if they found out it was Collard? I see. Well, Zuruan, are you saying you don't care what happens to your king or the others living in your homeland? I'll give you one last chance. If you apprehend those 2, I'll let you off with a light punishment. The heads hung there immobile, like 2 strange fruits. And eyeballs showing only whites were the same. It was as if they really were nothing more than decoration. Then where did his voice come from? Having no answer for Nia's silent questions, the prince shouted at the great demon. It's a bit late for that. Why would we believe your nonsense when you already killed the king? The king? Really? Nia could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Since this demon didn't have his own head, he didn't have facial expressions, which, yes, was a pain. They wouldn't be able to tell from his face whether a blow was effective or not. In that sense, Zuruan were also tricky opponents for humans. My job is to rule this land, so that place isn't my jurisdiction, but... So he was killed? That just means you had a fool for a king. How dare you? You traitors didn't come here to talk, did you? You came because you thought you could defeat me, right? So then what's your trump card? That human? A nearly 2-foot claw extending from the tip of the finger of his slender hand pointed at Nia. As if we would tell you. The demon replied calmly to the prince's shout. You don't have to. Shadow demons. The great demon's shadow stretched. Then it puffed up and went from 2 to 3 dimensions. What appeared was a pair of demons, typical in appearance except that they looked as if they'd been doused in black paint. This must have been why he didn't have any subhuman guards. You two, kill the Zeruan aside from the prince. I'm going to capture him. Human, if you turn on them, I'll free a number of people important to you trapped in the camps equal to the number of fingers on your hands. The demon proposed the deal Shizu had anticipated he would. Impressed with that foresight, Nia asked a question to put their opponent off guard. Really? She spoke timidly, testing his mood, and he sounded delighted. What? You'll betray us? When the Zeruan shouted, all the demons' attention fell on Nia. Shut up, shut up, shut up. I'm talking to her. I keep my promises. Count out who you'd like to protect and rescue. If you don't have enough fingers, we can negotiate, unprotected. As if he'd forgotten the words on guard, the great demon's stance was full of openings. Shizu, the ace up their sleeve, didn't fail to notice that. Springing from the shadows, she aimed her mana gun. When the gun spat fire, the great demon clasped a hand over his shoulder. Shizu had been standing by outside, so this was a total sneak attack. And it was the attack that kicked off the fight. The talk of negotiations that they had used to distract their enemy was over. The Zeruan attacked the shadow demons. At the same time, Shizu, who had burst into the room at tremendous speed, didn't slow down for an instant as she employed lightning-quick footwork to bypass the forward fighters of both sides and close in on the great demon. What? Aren't why? I don't owe you an explanation. Shizu used a knife to make a wide slash, but the great demon brushed the attack away with his claws. Nia knew there was no time for it now that the battle had begun, but she still complained to the Zeruan on her back. What do you mean her hair is black? It's blonde. Blonde? What is? Clearly her hair's light black. What? He didn't seem to be bluffing. Could it be that Zeruan perceive colors differently from humans? She had heard that some races who could see through any darkness were colorblind and only saw in black and white. Or that some could only distinguish colors in the light. The lighting in the pantry had been like that, geared for multiple races, probably so they could distinguish the colors of the foods. We can talk later. Ainz Wood, Lightning Claw. TCH. Yang Wuxing, Lightning Claw. Lightning coursed through the air like the swipe of a beast's claws, but disappeared midway. There were also the spells Wuxing, Gentle Metal, to lower defensive power, and Wuxing, Metal Strength, to increase attack power, and Wuxing, Summon Lightning Storm, but there was always the possibility that instead of canceling them out, the great demon would use a powerful spell of his own. To avoid that, the prince only cast attack spells that couldn't be ignored. He narrowed it down further to lightning, which he surmised was the great demon's weakness, and boosted its power with a wood element skill. A normal Wuxing spell might have been perfectly neutralized, but the prince's strengthened version could deal a tiny bit of damage that would add up. The grandmother should have had the same strengthening powers as the prince, but now she was an accessory for the great demon. He didn't have skills to boost spells, so the power of the prince's magic kept the pressure on. Since Nia was leaving the vanguard to Shizu, she needed to make sure she pulled her weight as the rear guard. Against such a tough enemy, she couldn't merely act as the prince's feet. She took aim with ultimate shooting star, super, and let an arrow fly. Though her aim was extremely precise, the great demon had no trouble slapping the arrow away with one hand. What a pest! Shock wave. Kalart's face, her mouth, moved, and the Tier 2 spell flew at Shizu. The invisible shock wave took her slightly off her feet, but there was no sign she had taken any damage, such as sluggish movement. One would hardly expect less from a difficulty level 150 demon maid. Ainz Wood, Lightning Claw. Yang Wuxing, Lightning Claw. They cast the same spells again, and a small amount of electricity coursed through the demon maid's body. Open wounds. The counterattack was a spell that worsened wounds. The target was, naturally, Shizu, who was the most exposed to the demon's claws. Nia could only see Shizu's back, but she didn't seem to be losing even a bit of her agility. A drop of sweat ran down Nia's spine. Nia was the only one in the party who could heal. That meant she was also in charge of healing, but regardless of how well one could sense their own body, it was extremely difficult to tell how injured someone else was without a wealth of experience. Especially with someone like Shizu, who didn't show emotions on her face, Nia was worried the maid would push past her limits before she realized it and collapse. That's why she was keeping an eye on how both Shizu and the prince were moving, but it made her busy in the complicated way of someone ambidextrous. Nonetheless, she had to do it. The prince continued firing off spells, and Shizu slashed at the demon with her knife while being slashed at in return. Everyone was performing their roles perfectly, so there was no way Nia could be the only one to complain that she couldn't handle it. Heavy recovery. Having judged that Shizu's wounds had started adding up, Nia activated the item from the King of Darkness to use the Tier 3 healing spell on her. Nia sensed that the faceless great demon's gaze was directed at her. His exclamation must have meant that he had discovered the healer, that is, the one he should take out first. And then he really did use the magic he was still allotted after countering the prince's spells to attack her. Shock wave. An invisible impact hit as if she'd been clobbered with a warhammer. A nauseating creak reverberated inside her body, and the pain coursing through her made her want to writhe. This hurt a lot more than the magic the VAM used. She couldn't believe Shizu had weathered this like it was nothing. It was a powerful blow, no wonder Collard Custodio was known as a genius. A hoarse scream escaped between the gaps in her gritted teeth. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Nia replied to the concerned prince. "Next, I'll get the Zeruan along. Why, no. I'm protecting Nia." Shizu spread her arms and stood in front of Nia to shield her. The great demon was tall, Shizu, in contrast, was short. She could stand there, but he probably still had a direct line of sight. Nevertheless, the sentiment made Nia so happy. "What?" the great demon cried hoarsely. Shizu's action must have done something to him. Did she use some kind of special ability? Or a spell? Nia had no idea what Shizu had done, but the great demon's urge to kill seemed to have weakened. Of course, it was probably just her imagination. There was no reason his hostility should have dropped at this moment. Nia felt she would be able to withstand one more spell like the attack earlier. Well, she wanted to believe she could anyhow. She had regained the mana she consumed in the battle with the VAM, but she wasn't sure how many times she would need to use heavy recovery, so she wanted to conserve it to the extent possible. That said, if she pushed herself to the brink, one little mistake could send her over. It was an extremely difficult thing to make out. "And her weapon is a bow that Lord Ainz lent to her," Shizu stated in a voice that was loud for her. She must have wanted to talk up the King of Darkness? Nia wanted to remind her they were in the middle of a battle, but maybe there was some reason behind it if the most experienced, most powerful person here was saying it. "What? That King of Darkness?" the demon aide shouted in surprise. The King of Darkness really was amazing. Jaldabaoth must have told this demon to be on guard against him. Yes. A bow made with runes. Unable to ignore what was just said, Nia admonished her, "Don't give away our secrets." "It's a weapon made with lost rune technology? With a weapon like that, you might be able to kill me." Why does he seem to be explaining everything so conveniently? Thought Nia before feeling ashamed of herself. They were in the middle of a life-and-death battle with a powerful enemy. A weakling like her had it hard enough already. She couldn't afford to waste even a tiny corner of her brain on idle thoughts like that. "Runes, you say? Marvelous." The demon aide spoke again, sounding extremely cautious. Maybe the idea was to distract Nia, breaking her focus. And in reality, "Runes?" she heard the prince asking from her back. So she said, "No. It's not that kind of weapon." Nia felt both Shizu and the great demon freeze. That, right. She figured they were locked motionless, faced with the realization that they were evenly matched. Runes, no. She fairly spat. The demon aide groaned. I see. Well, then. Blindness. Suddenly Nia's field of vision went black. That must have been his way of disabling the healer. The magic item Nia had borrowed could only cast heavy recovery, not any spells that would cure a status like blindness. If their party included a priest or other faith caster, it could have been healed easily enough. Unfortunately, things wouldn't be that simple. It was unclear how long this enchanted darkness would continue, but if she wanted to heal Shizu, she would have to approach within touching distance. I can't see. It's important to communicate with one's teammates. Shizu. If you get hurt, let me know. Sorry. I don't have a spell that can cure a status like that either. Don't worry about it. Replying to the apology that came from her back, Nia drew her bow. A body that large she would be able to shoot at from memory. She had learned a bit about fighting sizable opponents from their clash with the VAM. The bowstring twanged. The demon aide howled in pain. Nice. He tried to evade it but dodged the wrong way. A perfect shot. Hearing the prince's commentary, Nia prayed to the King of Darkness. How lucky was that? Let's maintain this momentum and take him down. Yeah. Right. It was difficult to hear through the sounds of the Zeruan fighting the shadow demons nearby, but focusing every fiber of her being, Nia sensed how Shizu was doing, as well as the demon aide's position, and continued attacking. Perhaps the demon had realized that he needed to crush Shizu first or he would lose. All his attacks were aimed at her. And many of the spells were the disabling type, like blindness that he had cast on Nia, so pretty much everything was neutralized. At that point, all they had to do was keep pushing. By the time the prince's mana had run out, they had won almost as if it had been a matter of course. His joyous shouts at that moment were borderline obnoxious. The Zeruan had lost some members but also won their battle. The only thing was that the spell on Nia still hadn't lifted. Her field of vision remained pitch black. But it shouldn't have been a spell that would rob her of the light forever. She was sure it would wear off soon. It was lasting so long because Collard Custodio was just that powerful of a caster. She couldn't see, but from the feel and sounds, she could tell the Zeruan had gathered around her. Prince? We're so glad you're safe. Yes. Please partake respectfully of the grandmother's corpse. You're gonna eat her? Nia quipped in her head. But he had said respectfully, so she could only assume that it was some sort of Zeruan mourning ritual. Nia, what will you do with the human's head? Do you eat it? No, that's not how we humans dispose of our dead. I'll bring it back to the castle. I see. Human funeral rites are quite puzzling. Well, you must feel the same about ours. I suppose that's what they call a cultural difference. Still, I can't thank you both enough. We never could have. Wait. We don't have time to chit-chat here. We need to get moving. A disturbance was audible in the distance. Either the Liberation Army was advancing toward them, or they'd been discovered by the Subhuman Alliance. It could also be some guards rushing toward them upon hearing the battle noises. No matter what it was, they couldn't stand around dawdling. You're right, Miss Shizu. As promised, please assist the Liberation Army with the capture of Karen Shah. Yes, of course. Hey, you. Sir. We'll get started right away. Would you and the humans please get into the barrels, Prince? We'll carry you out of the castle. Nia couldn't see so she wasn't sure, but she got the sense that Shizu, next to her, was hesitating about something. She understood why. She must have hated the barrels. Nia felt the same way. I'll assist. I will, too, after my blindness gets cured. The prince flailed on Nia's back like a freshly caught fish. It was trembles of delight. The fact that she knew that, her adaptability, was a bit stupefying. If my sisters-in-arms are off to battle, then so am I. Of course, I used up most of my mana, so I can't rely on any fancy spells, but I can cast some strengthening magic on you. Your Highness. Don't make a fuss. Are you telling me to be the kind of male who lets those who fought beside me battle on alone? That's about enough. Time to go. Shizu urged them to depart, as if she wanted to be done with the barrels as soon as possible. Let's take the barrels to a place where many of my fellow spawn are gathered. Please get in. End of the 6th chapter. If you like my content, join me on Patreon, where you can find more and exclusive novels. Also, you can leave a donation by clicking the Super Thanks button. Thank you very much for your support.